18. The time is 7:30 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilman Hache?
Here.
Councilman Seaton?
Here.
Councilman Voigt?
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh?
Here.
Mayor Knudsen?
Here. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join us in a moment of silence for our men and women serving our nation and all our first responders. Thank you. We'll go to public comment, not to exceed 3 minutes per person, 40 minutes in total. Please come on up, state your name and address.
Hi, good
evening. Good evening.
Jane Shinozuka, 825 Norgate. I was just wondering, I was fooling around on the website today, the town's site, and I was glad to see that now we have each of our boards, every board listed separately, so at least, you know, if somebody who's new to town, they'd know what boards we have if they want to get involved and so forth. But I'm curious to know, the one community relations meeting I've been to since I was appointed, and we've talked about it at Citizen Safety, there's been talk about having, you know, streamlining the process, so there will be minutes will be taken for each board and so forth. But is there going to be a repository somewhere online where somebody who's interested in that board or might want to know about it or might want to join will be able to go and look up and see all the minutes? So is there a spot, is that there and I'm not seeing it, or is it going to be there, or, you know, is that still in the works, or is that still the common thinking that that's going to happen?
Okay. We'll just get to that after we hear any other public comment, if that's okay, Jane. Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Ann Loving, 342 South Irving Street. Two things I wanted to speak about briefly. The first is Graydon opened on Saturday. It's great to have it open again. Everything is, you know, the water was clear, everything was going really well. It's a shame whatever happened on Monday, but whatever. Thank you for getting the pool up and running. I understand there were some last minute things with the water, and Heather got it done. The other thing is, I noticed on the avenue that every tree well has flowers in it, and I think in the past, individual store owners, at least one of my best friends is a store owner, have put their own flowers in the tree wells, and it looks great. And I wrote to the deputy mayor, who mentioned that he thinks it was Project Pride that was responsible, but it really looks nice, and I just wanted to thank whoever was responsible for that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just make one other?
Sure,
I
but
was
make it
really
quick 'cause
happy
you didn't
to
use your
see,
three.
Jane Shinozuka, 825 Norgate. I've seen this online too. Also, there's a series of all the public spaces in town, and I see on the agenda tonight that you're discussing different kinds of open space issues and so forth. And I just want to, on behalf of the other side of 17 people, if you can keep North Road Park. I was so thrilled, I couldn't believe it made it to this page, because nobody ever talks about it. And it is just a kind of a big open foresty looking land now, but I mean somewhere down the line, maybe not now, but keep it on your radar that especially where we are over there where there are no parks, it would be a great place. It's not an enormous space, but you really could do something with it. You could make it a place where people could go and sit and whatever. So thank you.
So any other public comments? All right, great. So real quick, just to Jane, boards and committees, we've been working behind the scenes to update the village website, but there are pages for each of the boards and committees, and one of the things we set out to do a while back is to make sure that all the bylaws for each board and committee posted, all members, and that we do have access to minutes of each meeting. So it's still a work in progress, and hopefully it will be a little bit easier to get that stuff uploaded once the website is fall finished and moved forward. I think North Park is on our Parks and Rec site. It's really a little gem. It's really beautiful over there, so we like that. And what was the other thing? Okay, and yes, Project Pride. They did a beautiful job, so great. All right, moving on.
Okay, we'll start with our discussion items under operations. So this is Kings Pond, Bergen County Open Space Trust Fund Phase 2, and Zabriskie Shedler House Historic Preservation Phase 3. So I'll have Nancy Bigos, Director of Parks and Recreation, and Janet Fricky, Assistant to the Village Manager, come up and kind of give an overview of each of these projects, and so we'll discuss them first. We are now required to hold a public hearing before we apply for grants under Bergen County Open Space or Bergen County Historic Trust, and so because of that, we are going to explain the projects, and then we'll hold public hearings on those projects, which were advertised, and then we will also do resolutions to authorize us to apply for these grants, for these Phase 2 and Phase 3 for these two projects. So we'll start with the Kings Pond park improvements. I do want to mention that Nancy and I and Chris and Janet, Chris Redeshauser and Janet, met with the residents on Lakeview Drive to let them know what was planned, and so that they could, ask questions, give suggestions, and this, and it was very productive, I thought. They gave us some good ideas, and they, for the most part, are very happy with the proposed improvements. So I'll have Nancy take it from here, kind of explain what this Phase 2 grant is for. Is the green light on? Is it? Okay, could you bring it close?
How's that?
Better.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Good evening, Mayor and Council. In following through on the initial grant application for infrastructure and cleanup, the village now wishes to apply for additional funding of Phase 2 through the Bergen County Open Space Grant. This would be for Phase 2, what I like to refer to as park amenities. Just to refresh your memory a little bit, as with any park development, we start with the hardscape. For us in Phase 1, that would have been the eradication of invasive Japanese knotweed, some roadway improvements, which included a concrete vertical curb, drainage basins, pavement of the streetscape landscaping, which would be a low buffer plantings, and 2 small parking lots consisting of 8 parking spaces and 1 ADA space in each, and a tree structure evaluation of the older trees on the park property. Phase 2, which we bring to you this evening, after meeting with the neighbors last Wednesday evening, would be a request for a grant application for $58,595 through the Bergen County Open Space Grant, which is a matching fund from the Village of Ridgewood. That total request would be $117,190. Like I shared with you, this would include park amenities. So to begin a little bit more, we would again look at the hardscape. We did the curbs, the roads, the lights, and some parking in Phase 1. Now we look to the fun part of the park. So we're looking at a stone dust walking pathway, 6 foot wide in a stone dust, that would walk our park users, if you want to look at the conceptual that you have in front of you, which would walk our park users along the waterway. Also along that dust walking path, we anticipate 5 park benches and a new shade tree canopy, We are finding through our village arborist, who has done an extensive evaluation on the willow trees there, that the majority of those trees are past their prime and most likely should be taken down. We're also looking to provide a lawn area, which would be for both active and passive play, just a simple fine topsoil grading and seeding of all of the open space that you would see on your map shaded in green. The final part of this would be the installation of a preschool elementary playground. So like I mentioned to you, the first phase, we anticipate putting in the curb, enlarging the street, kind of defining the park, which right now really has no boundaries. We'd like to make it safe, we'd like to make it secure, and then we'd like to come in on phase 2 and be able to just add some simple park amenities to this project.
Questions, anyone?
I have one. Thank you for putting all this together. It's much needed over there. Do you have any idea if the funding's approved, when phase 2 might get started or completed, or just some kind of ballpark when you think we'll start to see phase 2 happening?
When we met as a team, Deputy Mayor, we were possibly thinking of that the very beginning of this project could begin in the late fall. We need to really start with the road and the curb, which would define that property for us. Right now, it's kind of blended. So we'd like to really define the park property, give it its baseline, and then we would install the parking areas to define that a little bit. I know the neighbors shared with us that some of the street lights were out, so there are simple improvements that we can work with them to just highlight that area a little bit. We do need to do some park cleanup. You know, it's been years that these mature trees have been neglected, and they need to come out, so that would be happening also.
Okay, so maybe like next year sometime.
I hope in the fall.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, that would be the start of it, but then through the fall and winter, then maybe
Right.
like early spring, you get the
So the
playground in there.
grant that we have now that we're applying for would be the 2018 grant, and this application is due in Hackensack on Monday, June 14th. So after the hearing this evening, we'll finalize that. Hopefully you'll pass the resolution and we'll be able to move forward.
Great, thank you.
I do, thank you. Yeah, that's okay. So Nancy, you mentioned a new shade tree canopy. You're removing trees, are you putting some back
We
in place
are.
of those?
We
And
are.
what kind of trees would those be?
Well, you know what, we're looking for hardwood trees, and shade tree was really what we're looking for. If you could look, Councilman, on your conceptual, you'll see where the trees are. We're really looking to make that a nice strolling walkway where people can come down and read a book, you can walk with a stroller, you can bring a little picnic lunch if you'd like, but we are looking for, I want to say majestic trees, you know, something like oaks, like maples, that would be hardwood, and will be there for the next century or two.
Yeah, and do you know how many that would be?
20,
20?
yeah, we're anticipating 20,
Okay,
and 5 benches.
all right, thank you.
Nancy, just real quick, did you just say Monday, the June 14th? Because June 14th is Thursday.
The 18th, I'm sorry.
So
Yeah.
Monday, the 18th.
That's it.
Okay.
Oh, the hearing, right. Okay,
No, because I had that on my calendar, so when, I just had to go back and
Thank you.
double check that. Okay, all good, that's good. All right, Bernadette?
The only question that I have, and I think this is a great plan, I can see that you have the floodplain limit. Boy, all these words this evening. Is there any impact with the stone dust if we have any flooding going into the water, or how is that, like, how is it adhered to the ground, I guess? It's just loose dust that's compacted, so it could come loose if it was flooded.
I don't believe so, and I think that the reason that our village engineer chose that was because it is a porous surface. I don't know if Chris is behind
there.
me.
Yeah, he's
He
there.
could probably speak for himself.
Yeah.
But it is a porous surface, and once those cinders come together, they kind of form themselves a semi-permanent base, whereas
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever walked on any of those.
Yeah, but I didn't know if,
Back in the day, we ran track on those.
yeah, no kidding. But they come loose, though, so that's why I'm wondering if there was ever another flood, would it go into the water, and then would we get in any trouble downstream if our ash went downstream? So-
Do you want to ask Chris to come up? and
Yeah, Chris,
speak?
you
Come
wanna-
on, so why don't you just come on up and speak to that? That's a good question, great question.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Did you get the gist of it?
What's that?
I said, did you get the gist of the question?
We have
Yes, regarding stone dust, or also known as rock flour, it is an angular particle composition. It does compact. It can move if sufficient water force is applied. We haven't seen flooding in that area that has a lot of force and a lot of push. But if you were to have a heavy flood, yes, it could erode, but then again, so could most surfaces. A concrete sidewalk, for example, could be easily undermined. The reason we picked the rock flour is, as Nancy said, with the steel edging, it could be relatively compacted, and it is a suitable surface for someone in a wheelchair or for a parent pushing a child in a stroller.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that, if there is a flood and it goes into the water and goes downstream, that Hawthorne or, Patterson or any of the, other recipients of that, if it would cause any problems in the
No,
water.
it's basically like a sand.
It's just a sand.
It's a
Okay.
granular rock.
Okay.
It's just that in this mix, it has sharp angular fragments. If it gets washed away, it's going to be mixed in with any other runoff carried,
Okay.
transported materials.
And it's not going to harm animals or anything being sharp or, okay?
No.
Good. That's all I had.
Maybe just stay there in case Councilman Hache has a question.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, all right, good. So, a couple of questions. On the willow trees, that's never something we would plant again because they didn't belong there in the first place, right? They were,
Willow trees love the water. Their roots are really shallow, and I'm not sure when or how they were planted, or if it just happened to be a happenstance. But those trees are definitely more than 200 years old.
really?
Yes.
Wow, okay. All right, so I don't have any questions on this. I actually just wanted to say thank you because I just remember back how it seems like forever ago that Mike and I went there 4 years ago and kind of looked around and somehow got tangled in knotweed and started down this path. And I can't believe we're at this place and with your help and Janet's help and everyone's help. So we really appreciate that. So, and I think the residents appreciate it too, so thank you.
There's one more thing I did want to mention that Ms. Shanazuka mentioned before to you, that the Ridgewood Wildscape this Sunday, June 10th, is hosting Kings Pond Quest, Battling Invasive Species. So the group is actually getting together there to clear, again, some of the Japanese knotweed and to do a little guided tour and possibly a little park cleanup. So we've got that shared with our residents. We've put it on our Parks and Rec Facebook page, and we've got it out to the community.
Right, and we would be remiss not to thank Ridgewood Wildscape for all their hard work, energy, effort, and commitment, because it really has kind of been the driving force behind this, so we thank you, and Jeannie as well. She's not here, but thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on.
Okay, so the next project we want to speak about is the Zabriskie Shedler House on the Shedler property. This is actually phase 3 that we're going to apply for grant funding. So Janet's going to speak with you, to you about this. I just want you to kind of remind them what phase 1 and phase 2 are. Okay, thanks.
We seem like we've had this conversation a lot, and I'm sure you're all saying, I'm sorry, all right?
Is it on?
Okay, it's green, it's on. And you're saying, so we're not seeing anything. Some of the things I want to tell you is what actually has happened that you haven't seen, but it's all the building pieces to get to what you want to see. And in 2016, we got a grant for $116,000. These grants are all matching, dollar-for-dollar matches. And the other requirement is they're historic preservations. So you'll see that we've taken some very careful steps to be sure we meet every mark on historic preservation. We're fortunate, as you've seen, I think in the past, we had a hearing for pre-qualifying potential contractors. You know, somebody can build a roof, but the roof that we're going to be buying is one that is going to work on an 1820s Dutch frame house from the third period. And we won't qualify for our matches to come our way. So then 2016, 2017, we asked for 200,000. That is one where it's pending with the freeholders. On the June 14th, as the mayor was saying, there's a public hearing at Bergen County. Those who are interested in making a comment, plus minus whatever, should go and speak to that. We'll be there. So that's part of it. So, and the hearing tonight really is going to be on the third phase. We realize that when you get into a project, and particularly some of the environmental abatement, there turns out to be asbestos in the putty and the windows, and other things at that level that it takes a while to find out. So we want to be sure to be able to open a safe project to our community. So we went in for a third one, and we initially put a letter of intent saying we wanted $100,000, which is a $200,000 project. When we looked more closely, we think we can bring it down to 75. So that's what we'll be going in and justifying on the 2018 request. Okay. And I think many of you know the elements. We're restoring and rehabilitating the house. The roof, as we all know, with that blue tarp and make it disappear. And the interior systems, there's exterior shingles, et cetera, and the environmental abatement between, the basement with asbestos and the paint, and all of it has to be carefully taken care of. But what I did want to say also to you is what you haven't seen is this is a document. It's the historic preservation plan for the Zabriskie Shedler House. This tells you everything that needs to be done historically, and it's a roadmap to, our consultant put it together, Bergen County wanted it. I'm sure that you all are wondering, where is this money going? This shows you exactly where it needs to go. The other thing is the pre-qualification rules, which is when in February we met with you and we had to have a public hearing on that. That is done. We're hoping to get some contractors over the next 2 months. There's, first you qualify them as historic contractors, and then you go in for the kind of work that you need to have done. So there's 3. The other part of this project also is barrier-free components. I see there's a bathroom on the first floor that'll have to be redone. We'll make sure that it's barrier-free and the interest coming into the building. I'm hoping, and I've talked to Heather about community development block grant, which will help. It would be a match against our town funding. The other thing that you have not seen is also, and I think you know, where our consultant is working to list this on the National Historic Register. That probably will be submitted to Trenton by July 1st, and I'm told it takes about a month for them to process their piece of it. So that, again, is something going for this project. And any other questions that you may have?
Great. Okay. Questions, Jeff?
Thank you, by the way. How's the building going to be used? What's its purpose?
Some of those are in here as well. There'll be smaller meeting groups, lecture space. The public will be able to reserve it. Clubs will be able to meet there on a regular basis, if that's the case. We see some sports committees might have an interest in it. Storytelling type gathering spaces.
and committee workspace. A lot of times, there's never enough room to work. So it would be for our residents, potentially at another point. I mean, there may be a rental coming out of it, and as opportunities show and people are interested, I think it'll be something that'll be compelling and show an interest. So did you have some ideas about?
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
The other question I have is, how much are we on the hook for, the village, for this? I know we have matching grants, but in total, how much is
Right,
the-
it'd be the other 50% of what I mentioned.
Yeah, so how much is that?
So I didn't total those up this time. I did other times, but,
Was it around 650?
you
the
know,
whole
it's,
thing?
Well, no, it would be about 392,000.
We're on the hook for
Probably, yes.
392? Okay,
so 3,
yeah.
4.
And
Yeah, 3 to 400,000.
So how are we paying for that, the 392,000?
I'm guessing at this point it would be bonded. That's,
Is that
Heather can
what we're
speak to
gonna do?
that.
Yeah, we put them in, we put the money into the capital budgets over the years. And so each year we put a certain amount in for improvements to this property and to the house.
And do you have any idea as to how much it's gonna cost for upkeep per year?
I don't know the cost. I do know that we have a whole maintenance plan that, you know, will have to be looked at in terms of, you know, the cycle on painting, the cycle on cleaning.
Would that be something we
and-
would want to do? I mean, just kind of understand how much it's going to cost us over the years, each year, to kind of keep it up?
We could estimate it. I mean, I don't know that we could get hard costs because obviously you'd estimate that every so, you know, so many years you'd paint. You know, you'd need obviously cleaning, you know, on several times a week probably, depending on the meeting schedules. You know, so, I mean, it's possible. It's possible we may have to go outside to have cleaning services because I think our custodial staff currently is, you know, full with what they're doing with the buildings we currently have in this area. So something we'd have to look at. But we might be able to come up with some kind of estimate.
Thank you.
I think also you know, the amount of maintenance is the use and the type of use. I think if there's, you know, sports groups and, you know, a lot of that, it'll change, but we'll have to see as we go along.
No questions, thank you. I'm just excited that this is moving forward, and I see it as a way to offer equal access to all the great programming from the Parks Department to everybody on every side of Ridgewood. So it's good stuff, thanks.
Good.
So, you know, I find it kind of funny that the last time I was on the council, I think it was like within the first weeks of being on the council, we all had a meeting over at Shedler at the house, and they actually did an article in the paper about it. And I'm like looking at all this stuff, and I'm thinking, that was 8 years ago, and this is finally like moving really, really in a direction that I think everybody in the village is going to be really happy about. So I'm glad that, you know, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly.
Slow and steady, for sure. Councilman O'Shea.
No questions, thank you.
So I just actually wanted to add to the use, because we were in that meeting with Margaret Hickey, and one of the things she pointed out, and if you recall, was that it was really an opportunity to do as a rental for small showers, more intimate settings, just because of the type of structure and the intimacy of the rooms. And I think we had a conversation even to look at how it could be furnished more period furniture that would allow for that kind of ambiance. So I think that that was an opportunity as a revenue stream from a rental perspective. And I thought that was a really great observation, because the kitchen itself was already set up as a kind of a catering kitchen.
Yeah, we
is what-
spoke about that.
Yeah, she did speak about that she said it was already ideally situated to facilitate exactly that type of use. So I think that that's something in the back of our minds we'll want to keep, you know, as a potential future use. I actually am very excited at that opportunity as an option. I could see myself actually renting that and using it for different parties and such. Let me just see, did I have any other questions? No, I think we're good. I think we're good, thank you, and thank you. I agree with Councilman Walsh. I think that, that this house has been, you know, the struggles and all the challenges moving forward, but we're here in a place that's really exciting, and I think that the village, and especially the state, having a property like this on the state registry and possibly even a national registry, I think is not only something that we'll appreciate, but we'll also be very proud of in the long term. So I think this preservation of history is really important for our community. So thank you again. And so with that, we're good? Do we have anything else? Okay, okay, great. So with that, we're going to take a motion to suspend the work session and convene the special public meeting.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Hache?
Yes.
Sedin?
Yes.
Voigt?
Yes.
Walsh?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall and by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to the same as provided by law of a schedule including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call, please.
Hache?
Here.
Councilman Sedin?
Here.
Councilman Voigt?
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh?
Here.
Mayor Knutson?
Here.
Okay, so this is, so this will be the, for the public hearing on the grant application for Kings Pond Park Development Phase 2. The proposed improvements to Kings Pond Park included in Phase 2 of the development plans, which were discussed in the work session this evening, are being considered. A public hearing on Phase 2 improvements is required due to the fact that the village is submitting a grant application for this project from the Bergen County Open Space Trust Fund. The public hearing this evening is specifically on the proposed improvements to Kings Pond Park, Phase 2, and the Village Council will listen to comments from the public specifically on this matter. The public hearing is now open.
Good evening, Ellie Gruber, 229 South Irving. I do have a couple of comments, and of course, I think the people who deserve the most thanks are the Chevettes who've been fighting for Kings Pond Park since, I don't know when. Anyway, thank you to this council. I really, you've just done a wonderful job in understanding how important this beautiful space is. Two questions, of course, we want native plants, native trees. The second thing is that Wildscape received permission from the council to do spraying of invasive plants. So we're trying to get the DEP authorized company wants to get in there soon. So I don't know how they're going to be doing some along there. They're going to be doing some in Gypsy Pond where they are. Is this going to interfere in any way? Because cutting down knotweed doesn't do any good unless it's treated, because it just loves to be cut down and comes back. It's just very strong that way. So I think it has to be treated. I don't want it to be cut down, and then you're going to make this beautiful area, and before you know it, it's going to come up again. That's why it's being treated by the DEP. It's treated in a certain way. You cut it down and you treat the roots. So if you're going to be working over cutting it down and then doing all this beautiful work, I don't know, maybe someone can answer
I don't know,
that.
maybe if, okay, so I don't think it interferes, but do you want to come on up and speak to that, Nancy? Is that helpful? Because I think we're on schedule. With,
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
good.
we're working toward that,
Good.
so I think we're
Well,
good
we
to
just
go.
need the mysterious third quote.
What I understand in working with our village engineer is that all of the work that's being done regarding the invasive Japanese knotweed is going to be sprayed. It was through the Kings Pond Quest and the Wildscape where it says to bring your head shears and help cut down invasive knotweed at the trail entrance. So I'm not sure.
Correct,
what
but
your
it's cutting down
questioning.
because it's going to be treated by the DEP. You don't treat it until it's cut down.
We're all aware of that.
Yeah, so,
Thank you.
yeah. So,
Agreed.
yeah, okay. I just want to make sure.
Okay, so we're on schedule, so
Okay.
nothing interferes
Okay.
with our treatment, the DEP treatment and the spraying of the knotweed. We will
Right.
not, we are committed to moving this project forward properly
Okay,
and thoughtfully.
just
Yep.
saying.
We're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Ally.
Nancy.
Good
George
evening.
Chabet. Kings Pond, I've been fighting for that for over 40 years.
Could we just have your address, please, Mr. Chabet?
George Chabet, 334 Lakeview Drive, Ridgewood. And for the last 20 years, no council has done anything except this one. So I want to congratulate this council. It was a surprise when last week we had a meeting with the neighbors and with the committee, and we're very pleased with the presentation and your commitment to move ahead. I'd like to make one statement. Looking at phase one seems like an excellent way to start and prepare the area for what's going to come later. Phase two is mainly a cosmetic presentation and does nothing to enhance the pond itself. So the pond's name basically is Kings Pond Park. And so what I'm suggesting is that we, somewhere in between phase one and phase two, let's call it phase 1.5, that somehow we can divert funds from some other area without going through the process of grants and whatnot, and to dredge the pond. That is basically the worst looking, since I've been there, it's never looked as bad as it does now. So I'm suggesting that through your techniques, you could find some discretionary funds, or you can reallocate funds from some other project that has not been neglected as much as this, and that you put in an effort to, between phase one and phase two, is to dredge the pond, and you could take that into consideration. I don't want to screw anything up that you're planning, because everyone's on board. But I think if we could do that, it would make me happy. That shouldn't. But anyhow, I think I would like to see that done before phase two starts, even if you have to delay phase two. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, George.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I move the public hearing be closed. Oh, hold on. Seeing one more.
Good evening.
Good evening. Robert Peacock, 252 Lakeview Drive.
I'm sorry, sir. Say that again, please.
Robert Peacock, 252 Lakeview Drive. Kudos, again, thank you very much. I'm here 23 years in the village. We moved in about a year and a half into our residency here. We noticed the pond was dredged about 20 plus years ago, and it was quite a task. When they dredged it, they put all the dredging materials on the field and let it dry out. And that's why I think, Mr. Chabet, we have concerns that if we do this beautification in phase two, and there is decision to dredge it, the tractors and the backloaders, everything have to drive over all the beautiful phase two project to dredge it. So that's all. It's a concern. Again, over the years I've been here, I've watched many of people go down there and fish. Our kids have been raised on that pond. Mr. Chabet's kayak and rowboat has always been available to our kids to go out there and hang out in the pond. Not that it's done daily, like we see in the big fields or the big, seaside resorts and stuff like that. But they've enjoyed it. Many young people have gone down there fishing. Bullhead catfish has been down there, the carps, a lot of good qualities. We're getting a lot of wildlife down there. Maybe 10 years ago, we were able to get lights brought down, temporary lights. The high school hockey team practiced down there for 2 winters when my son was playing ice hockey for the high school. Today, it doesn't freeze well enough because it's gunked. There's so much stuff there, it doesn't freeze. It froze for about 5 days around Christmas this year. Then henceforth, it's been just running and muck and not safe to skate on. There's branches, there's trees sitting in the pond, so it's really not sports-minded, nor is it pleasing to the view. So that's all that the residents are asking. If we're going to move forward, if there is a thought of dredging in the future, Oh, and backpedal, Lake Street, the brook was fixed up near the old A&P, which is now the Acme. That was done maybe 8, 10 years ago. And I was talking to the engineers when they were doing that, and they said, oh, this is going to help things. It was a better path, it was a clearer path for the water to come through, and instead of bottlenecking in Kings Pond, it would be stronger to push things through. The old shopping carts are now out, but then a lot of that residue was still there from even that construction project. And the residue came down and has never been cleared. But now they've supposedly got better flowing water from that project that the county did years ago with that bridge. So again, I don't want to reiterate on everything, but we're pleased with this project moving on. It's a great area. You know, you folks have all been down to visit it. We've seen you down there visiting. We got a lot of wildlife coming back. You know, we got fox down there, we got the egrets and stuff like that. They've got a family of deer. They'll just watch them every evening, things like that. It's beautiful. You would never know you're in Bergen County sometimes when we have guests. But this project is wonderful, but maybe we can address things if we're going to dredge, if that opportunity is there, to maybe put it in, and like Mr. Chabet said, 1.5. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right, now I move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Ashe?
Yes.
Eden?
Yes.
Voigt?
Yes.
Walsh?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Now our second public hearing on a grant application for the Zabriskie Shedler House Phase 3. The proposed improvements to the Zabriskie Shedler House Phase 3, which will include additional work required to be done on the house so that it can be open to the public, which were discussed in the work session this evening, are being considered. A public hearing on Phase 3 improvements to the Zabriskie Shedler House is required due to the fact that the village is submitting a grant application for this project from the Bergen County Historic Preservation Trust Fund. The public hearing this evening is specifically on the improvements to the Zabriskie Shedler House, Phase 3, and the Village Council will listen to comments from the public specifically on this matter. The public hearing is now open.
Ellie Gruber, 229, my two favorite subjects tonight in one night. It's fascinating.
Luck of the draw.
I congratulate you. It's so bittersweet that Isabella can't be here to hear this. I'm so thrilled at what you're doing. It's money worthwhile spent. You know, it reminds me when we wanted to do the Leicester Stable, everyone was against it, everyone. And now it's the most used built, you know, this is not going to be the stable, but it's going to be worthwhile. It's money well spent, and I just thank you all. Thank you for all of the hard work of preparing the grants. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Anyone else? I move the public hearing be closed.
Second? Second. Ashe?
Yes.
Eden?
Yes.
Voigt?
Yes.
Walsh?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
I'll read the two resolutions.
Can I just say one thing before? So just in terms of the dredging, is that something that we can work with Wildscape? Because I know that Jeannie had some thoughts about, hopefully I get the word right, snagging versus, snagging, I got it? Oh, de-snagging. Well, we were snagging first before we had to okay. So de-snagging versus dredging. So maybe we could coordinate with Jeannie and just see what we need to do, because it does make sense that if we were going to do anything, we would want to do it before we do all this. Do you want to come on up and speak to that? Okay. Tell him, Ellie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm sorry, I don't hear so well out of my left ear. The pond was last dredged just before Hurricane Floyd hit. That filled it back up with sediment, and it was re-dredged, according to what I understand from our records. It was dredged, not de-snagged or de-silted. To do a dredging project will require permitting with NJDEP. We need to get a lot of material out. As some of the residents said, the work on the Lake Street Bridge probably brought some more sediment down in the pond. Currently, the pond has a very shallow water depth. There is some areas where you can actually see some of the leaf matter above the surface. You see branches in it. Yes, there's a nice egret hanging out there. He seems to like it, but it should be dredged. I don't think the snagging is going to do much of anything.
So why don't we just at least reach out for Jeannie and coordinate, and I have that email because she had some concerns about dredging as opposed to desnagging, so what we can do is just coordinate that effort and figure out how it fits into this, and then we
We'll
have
do that. We'll
Okay.
meet with her.
All right, good, all right,
Okay.
good to go.
And then if I may, what Ellie was also mentioning, we have a partnership with Bergen County Mosquito Control. They have a long-reach excavator that's used for dredging. Every year they help us out with getting Graydon Pool set up for the season. We'll probably reach out to them and see if they could be available to help, or if that's something they would like to work with us on. They may require the village to do the permitting with DEP, and they might be able to provide the machinery and labor to some extent.
Now, is there a particular time that it would be better to do the dredging?
It's a good winter job, and the reason I say that is sometimes if you're digging up a lot of organic matter in the summer, it gets to be a little more odoriferous. It stinks. And,
got
you know,
odoriferous.
as some of the residents also said, depending what you excavate, you may have to dewater it on site, so you're not trying to transport a truckload of slop off-site.
Okay, all right, so we'll just coordinate that effort. Okay, good. Did we do okay, so now we're going to do the resolution, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. First resolution is 18-166. Whereas the Bergen County Open Space Recreation Floodplain Protection, Farmland and Historic Preservation Trust Fund, parentheses, County Trust Fund, provides matching grants to municipal governments and to nonprofit organizations for assistance in the development or redevelopment of outdoor municipal recreation facilities. And whereas the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood desires to further the public interest by obtaining a matching grant of $58,580 from the County Trust Fund to fund the following project, Kings Pond Park Development / Phase 2, and whereas the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood has reviewed the Bergen County Trust Fund Municipal Program Park Improvement Application and Instructions, and desires to make application for a matching grant and provide application information for and furnish such documents as may be required. And whereas, as part of the application process, the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood held the required public hearing to receive public comments on the proposed park improvements for the application on June 6, 2018. And whereas the County of Bergen shall determine whether the application is complete and in conformance with the scope and intent of the Bergen County Trust Fund. And whereas the applicant is willing to use the County Trust Fund in accordance with such rules, regulations, and applicable statutes, and is willing to enter into an agreement with the County of Bergen for the above-named project and ensure its completion on or about the project contract expiration date. Now therefore be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that it is hereby authorized to submit the above completed project application to the Bergen County by the deadline of June 18, 2018, as established by the Bergen County, and that in the event of a county trust fund award that may be less than the grant amount requested above, the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood has or will secure the balance of funding necessary to complete the project or modify the project as necessary, and that the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood is committed to providing a dollar-for-dollar cash match for the project, and that only those park improvements identified and approved in the project application, its trust fund contract, or other documentation will be considered eligible for reimbursement, and that the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood agrees to comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations in its performance of the project, and that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Okay. Roll call vote. We're going to take a vote.
So moved. We need a motion.
Councilwoman Walsh moved
Councilwoman
it.
Yeah,
Walsh
Second.
moved it, okay.
A
Now we'll
second?
do a roll call vote.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. And Hache?
Yes.
Seaton?
Yes?
Voigt?
Yes.
Walsh?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 18-167. Whereas the Bergen County Open Space Recreation Floodplain Protection Farmland and Historic Preservation Trust Fund, parentheses, County Trust Fund, provides matching grants to municipal governments and offers assistance in the rehabilitation and restoration of appropriate historic properties and historic structures. And whereas the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood desires to further the public interest by obtaining a matching grant of $75,000 from the County Trust Fund to fund the following project: Zabriskie Shedler House, Phase 3. And whereas the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood has reviewed the Bergen County Trust Fund Program and the Historic Preservation Trust Fund statements and desires to make application for a matching grant and provide application information for such a matching grant and include information in all documents as may be required. And whereas the rules and regulations of the Bergen County Historic Preservation Trust Fund require the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood to conduct a public hearing for public comments on the 2018 Historic Preservation Trust Fund grant application to rehabilitate and restore the Zabriskie Shedler House Phase 3. And whereas the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood held the required public hearing to receive public comments on the proposed Zabriskie Shedler House historic improvements for the application on June 6, 2018, and will submit minutes of the hearing when available. Whereas the County of Bergen shall determine whether the application is completed in conformance with the scope and intent of the Bergen County Trust Fund. Whereas the applicant is willing to use the county trust fund in accordance with such rules, regulations, and applicable statutes, and is willing to enter in an agreement with the County of Bergen for the above-named project contract expiration date. Now therefore be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that it is hereby authorized to submit the above completed project application to Bergen County by the deadline of June 18, 2018, as established by Bergen County, and that in the event of a county trust fund award that may be less than the grant amount requested above, the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood has or will secure the balance of funding necessary to complete the project or modify the project as necessary, and that the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood is committed to providing a dollar-for-dollar cash match for the project, and that only those Zabriskie Shedler House Phase 3 restorations identified and approved in the project application, its trust fund contract, or other documentation will be considered eligible for reimbursement, and that the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood agrees to comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations in its performance of the project, and that this resolution shall take effect immediately. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Hache?
Yes.
Sedin?
Yes.
Boyd?
I'm concerned that we don't necessarily have a plan for what this is going to be used for ultimately and what it's going to cost us long-term. And if I had that information, I'd feel more comfortable in voting yes on this. So I'm going to abstain.
Walsh?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes. Okay, and there we have it. So with that, we'll take a motion to adjourn the special public meeting and reconvene our work session.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
2 seconds, that's like 4. Sorry. I'll let them have it.
Take a vote. Hache?
Yes.
Sedin?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes.
Walsh?
yes.
Knudsen?
Yes. and
Thank you.
So we are back and moving on to presentations.
Right, our first presentation is from the Acacia Financial Group. Bob Rooney, our CFOs, and Josh Nikita from Acacia are both going to come up and give a presentation. This is on the funding for the Hudson Street parking garage.
So good evening, and just for the record, and for all our at-home viewers, do you just want to state your name and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Josh Nikita with Acacia Financial Group.
Is the button on? Thanks.
My name is Josh Nikita with Acacia Financial Group. We are the financial advisor to the village.
Great.
And Bob Rooney, Chief Financial Officer and Parking Utility Director.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Just let me begin. Donna, could you put that presentation up, please? Josh has brought hard copy of what Heather has sent out if anybody needs it. Otherwise, you can
We have.
look it on. Right. that's
Yeah,
good.
I have copies if anyone needs it.
So while Donna's doing that, we asked Josh to take a look at, excuse me, the debt that would be associated with the construction of the garage and any additional costs that we might incur as a result. We asked him to look at different scenarios on a 25 and 30-year term on the debt. We also asked him to look at if we were to capitalize interest over the first couple of years were allowable, as to what that would cost the village. And we also asked them to take a look at the market as to where we fall out with short-term borrowing, long-term borrowing, and what the impact would have on the interest rates that we would have. So with that, I'll hand it off to Josh, and we can walk through this process.
Great. Thanks, Bob, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to present to you this evening. As Bob mentioned, we've worked with him and Heather over the last several weeks on preparing a number of financing structures and options that are available to the village in connection with the Hudson Street parking garage. Given the AAA credit rating of the village, I think the most attractive option and the least costly would be the issuance of general obligation bonds of the village. Short-term notes are also an alternative, but given the current interest rate environment, which I'll talk a little bit about later in the presentation, we really believe that long-term fixed-rate bonds are the best choice for the village at this time. It'll allow you to lock in the cost of the funds at current historically low interest rates, and provide, most importantly, budget certainty for the parking utility. And that's important given, our review of the Walker study. I know you're all familiar with that. So having certainty with respect to what those payments are going to be going forward, we think is very important given the size of the bond issue. So that being said, the transactions being undertaken under local New Jersey redevelopment area law. And fortunately, that provides you with a lot of flexibility in terms of how the bonds can be structured and amortized. Typically, when a bond issue is done on the municipal level, you have a level debt service structure over a period of, call it 10, 20, 30 years, depending on the average life of the project. And there's strict limitations on how those bonds are amortized. You have to begin paying down the principal within 1 year of the issuance. So, for example, if we were to issue the bonds this August, you would have to make a principal payment next August, 2019. When looking at the Walker parking study, they're assuming that the first payment on the debt service does not begin until 2020. So having that flexibility under redevelopment area law is a great tool in your toolbox when we're undertaking this project. So what we did is we prepared a number of scenarios, as Bob mentioned, on a 25-year basis and a 30-year basis. And you can really do anything in between. There's nothing written in the market or the state law that says you can't do a 26-year bond or a 27-year bond, but typically you look at sort of the even numbers, 20, 25, 30 years. And we presented those options so you can see what the cost is based on the current market conditions and based on the different amortization structures. So if you look at the first page, which is, I know, difficult to see on the screen, but if you look at your hard copies, what we've presented was the traditional level debt service structure, which is similar to a mortgage, for example. You have the same payment. In this case, debt service is paid semi-annually. We're showing annual payments, and they're typically level annual payments over the term of the bond. That would be the first column to the left for the 25-year. We then showed what a deferred principal schedule would look like. This would be where you defer principal. In this case, we're deferring it to 2021, and then begin level debt service thereafter. So you can see that there's slightly smaller payments in 19 and 20, and then it ramps up in 21 on out. And the final scenario that we ran for the 25-year option is deferred principal to 21 with capitalized interest in 2019. And what capitalized interest is you still have to make that interest payment. That never goes away, even though you may be deferring principal. But what we do under that scenario is we borrow additional money for that interest payment that is set aside in an account and is used to make that payment instead of funds from the parking utility. And that helps, can obviously smooth out the any potential increases associated with the parking project itself. So you can see what the 25-year amortization structures look like. For the 30-year scenarios, we actually ran the same exact scenarios. Level debt service, deferred principal for 2 years, and then deferred principal for 2 years with the capitalized interest. These are shown just for illustrative purposes now. As I mentioned, there's other flexibility that we have. We don't necessarily have to defer principal just for those 2 years. We don't necessarily have to have level debt service immediately after that 2-year period. You could begin ramping up the debt service, for example, looking at the 30-year option, so that it doesn't jump from $462,000 to $722, but rather $462 to $562 and so forth. There's a lot of options that you have, and I think we would work closely with Walker in their pro forma that they presented in their parking study to create a scenario that had a mix of the lowest cost of funding and while being sensitive to the parking rates that are needed to generate enough revenue to pay for the operations and debt service on the bond issue. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on these scenarios. And as far as the market goes, if you turn to the page 4 of the presentation, is just a real quick recap of the market. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, rates remain very attractive, even though we're all aware that the Fed has been raising rates recently over the last 18 months or so. They expect to do it again in June, and we expect probably one more rate increase in 2018. Most Wall Street forecasts project interest rates in general to continue to tick upward, which again is the reason why we're recommending locking in long-term borrowing rates now. The recent rate increases have really been felt on the front end of the yield curve. We've had a significant flattening of the yield curve, meaning short-term rates are rising quicker than long-term rates. And that's seen in the graph on the bottom left-hand corner, where you can see the 10-year average yield curve is the green line, more of your traditional upward sloping curve. And the blue line is current rates, which you can see is relatively flat, which is why when you borrowed notes last year, the Village did, I think you've received a 1% interest rate approximately. Rate note, we did 2 note sales today, my firm, the rates are 2%. So within 1 year period, you had a 1% increase in interest rates on the short-term side. It's very volatile right now. Again, another reason why when you're borrowing this sum of money and you expect that you know you're gonna have to lock in rates at some point, now is a good time to do that. So we would advise, again, long-term fixed rate bonds in connection with the transaction. And finally, on the last page, I think just there's a little bit more data on the interest rate environment. And again, looking at the yield curve, the bottom red line shows the 1-year rate. And you can see the difference between the 1-year rate and the 30-year rate in December of 2010 had a spread of about almost 4%. Today, that spread is down to 1.3%. So significant flattening of the curve when you look back over, an 8-10 year history. Again, supporting, we believe, our recommendation to do fixed rate bonds. So with that, I'll pause. I know I said a lot, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Great. Councilman Voigt.
Yeah, how long can you defer principal?
You can, under the redevelopment area law, it's pretty flexible. You could defer it for, any number of years. There's no requirement that you need to begin paying it down under the law. I would say the bigger constraint that you have is sort of the financial model itself, right? You don't want to have a 20-year bullet maturity, so you pay nothing, and then all of a sudden you have an $11 million payment coming due. So you want to be really sensitive to that. I think you want to, the real constraint is the coverage factors in the model. You're going to run this model out over a 20, 30-year period, and you want to see that in every year you're meeting your coverages. So that's really what's going to dictate the amortization structure more so than law in this case.
So you picked 2 years to defer to principal. I mean, if we were to extend it out to 5 years, I mean, obviously that's going to increase the cost overall. I would guess, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. When you look at all the scenarios, you can see obviously the more you're deferring principal and the more you capitalize interest, that adds to the cost of the overall borrowing. There's no doubt about that. So the further you continue to exacerbate that, it will be more costly.
As a way of paying for this, do you recommend deferring principal for a period of time?
I think given what we've seen in the last Walker study, and that's the only document that I've seen is the last one, the dated February 25th, 2018, in order to meet the coverages and provide additional, I'll call it surplus funds for a maintenance fund that would probably be needed to operate it, and to provide some additional cushion in the event of unforeseen events, it probably makes sense to defer principal for a number of years in the beginning part of the bond issue. Meaning I don't think, looking at the numbers, you'd want to go 10 years or beyond, but maybe there's some middle ground, the first couple of years and then beginning to ramp up principal payments to begin generating some surpluses and mitigating spikes in parking rates.
So would you be comfortable from a financial analysis standpoint if we deferred this 4 years or 5 years, the principal? I mean, is that,
Jeff, I think one of the things we have to take into consideration is the balance as to when the timing of rate increases. So we have to work close with Walker and how we're going to project the debt as to what makes sense. So if we're going to build up reserves for 4 or 5 years, then that may be an alternative, is to defer the principal payments and at the same time bringing in more revenue. But if we try to balance that, it may be 2 years. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. So, you know, it's...
yeah. The thing I'm worried about is, you know, jacking up the parking rates immediately, and maybe if we did it over time, it'd be more palatable. So that's kind of the thinking of why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah. No, and again, there has to be a conversation as to the timing of those things.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I would add, we're talking a lot about deferring the principal payments. With respect to capitalized interest, there are limitations on how much you can capitalize interest. It's typically up until 6 months after the construction completion date. So let's just say it's a year to complete construction, you could capitalize interest for 18 months on the bond issue. So there are limitations on that. You can't do that forever.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, putting this together. It's definitely going to be helpful. There's a note here that municipal bond issuance is down about 26% this year, at this point in this year versus last year.
Yes.
Is that expected to go up, or is it a timing issue, or is it just that it's going to be down close to that much throughout the year?
I think so, because of the tax reform law that was passed at the end of last year, that eliminated certain aspects of the municipal market, which is driving that down primarily. Advance refundings are no longer permitted. So that was about a quarter of the market, historically, looking back historically over the last 5 years. And what we saw was at the end of 17, there was a huge rush to get to market. December of 17 was the largest issue in the history, largest issuance month in the history of the municipal market, pre-86. With over $60 billion in issuance, because folks were coming to market to get their advance refundings done. That's that's causing some a dry up in bond issuances in the first half of this year, but also because you can no longer do certain bond issues. So I think you're going to see somewhat reduced level of bond issues going forward. Looking beyond this year, it's difficult to predict because you never know what other incentives are out there or what other needs, capital needs are required across the country and in the state for new projects.
And then, you know, my question about that would be since we're going to be issuing the bonds for this, is there would that help negotiate a couple basis points off of the interest rate because of the less issuance out there, so there'd be less bonds?
Yeah, very good question. It's it's just purely supply and demand. It's pure economics, right? The lack of supply is really driving up demand. There is a strong demand for bonds, particularly in New Jersey, because we're a high-income state, so investors want that tax-free bond, and having a AAA credit rating is even that much more attractive, so there's not that many AAA municipalities around, so there will be a lot of interest in this bond. So that's why we're, again, recommending going out long-term and doing it as soon as you can while rates remain attractive, because we do believe eventually rates will push up. The supply and demand factor is helping keeping them down, but because tax rates are now lower, the benefit of tax-exempt bonds isn't as great to those wealthy individuals who generally purchase them. Okay. So, but right now the dynamics are pretty favorable.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions just to clarify the numbers. So in these numbers, are you including the sinking fund for maintenance of the garage? Because I heard you say there's maintenance included, so I just want to be clear on, you know, they had given us a life expectancy plus or minus of 30 years. So in this funding, outside of any other costs of our budget, you're saying all of the maintenance costs are in this funding, or where? I was confused as to where what this maintenance cost is.
Well, excuse me. What the suggestion would be is that we put so much money aside every year into a maintenance fund, take that money out of surplus. So, I'm sorry. So that way, in case you have the need, or if you have to do the scrubbing, you have to do the big things, you have money put aside for it. So that's taking the money out of operations every year. In this capital number, right now is construction of roughly $11 million, a 5% add-on for cost of issuance, which can change and probably will change because of the redevelopment laws. We'll have some flexibility on that in reducing that. And the capitalized interest number, if that gets charged back to the ordinance. So that's where that is. But the maintenance part will all be on a go-forward basis.
Okay, so the numbers that you were talking about, I don't know that surplus would be the way to look at it, only because we don't know if we'll have surplus in the coming 30 years. I mean, that's for maybe another council to opine on. But so in terms of the maintenance, I'll call it a sinking fund, that really is going to be part of our budget going forward. I don't think that in my opinion, a surplus wouldn't be the thought process.
You're correct in what you're saying. We had a conversation with Walker this morning when we talked about different scenarios, and it will determine when the rate increases are put into place as to whether or not there'll be surplus generated on the beginning of the amortization period, in which case a piece of that would be put aside for the maintenance. Okay. Other than that, yes, it's going to be an operating cost every year to be dealt with.
Right, okay. And then I guess the other question is, you guys have talked about our AAA rating. So typically our AAA rating is like our advance to go with a lot of financial institutions. So would we even be charged basis points if we have such a good rating? Why would there be this need, and what is the value of the 50 basis points on this?
That's just being conservative, because okay, as I mentioned, we're not selling the bonds today.
Right.
We'd be selling them 2 months from now, 3 months from now, to the extent that's the schedule we're going forward. So I wanted to build in some flexibility for potential increases in rates going forward. We know the Fed is going to be taking action, and well, we believe that the Fed's going to be taking action in June, and there could be other factors that drive up rates. As we know, there's a lot of volatility in the market, so we like to put a little cushion on top of where we think the current market is, just so we're presenting numbers that we think are conservative.
Okay, so then what is that? What is the value of that?
The value of that?
Where can we see that in this?
Yeah, that is, these numbers are based on current market conditions as of a few days ago. Okay. There's a daily index that's published, the AAA index. It's called MMD, Municipal Market Data. Generally, AAA, all bonds will price off of that. That's a AAA high-grade index. AAA issuers actually may price a little wider than that, so it'll be call it a 3% rate. Maybe you're plus 15, plus 10 basis points on top of that. We did that plus another 50 on top of it. So we think we're being pretty conservative on the rate. So that's how we arrived at your all-in borrowing cost on the 25-year scenario of a 380. On the 30-year scenario, it was about a 395.
Okay.
And that's reflective of that 50 basis point cushion.
Okay, so it is included in here. So these numbers could go down based on our
That's what we cross our fingers, we hope, but you will not know what your rates are until the bond sale takes place.
Okay, okay. And then I guess the other question is kind of going back to the actual age, the effective age when we get to 30 years of the garage. What possible options could we have in terms of financing if, let's just say, somewhere along the road we have some sort of event that has to be acted upon, and we have to, something happens in the garage, let's say, that has to be fixed immediately. Would this money be restructured, or how would that work if there was some event that we had to?
That would be additional. So if you had an issue where you had a major flaw in foundation or something that had to be dealt with to the permanent structure, you would have to have, assuming there's no money left in this ordinance, you would have to have another ordinance to move forward.
So it would be they would be completely separate.
But we do have the capacity and the borrowing power. This is deductible under redevelopment laws, so it doesn't impact on our borrowing power at all.
Okay,
And I would add that this bond issue itself will have a call feature. The standard call feature in the municipal market is 10 years. So
Okay.
on that 10-year anniversary, you're able to take advantage of rates are lower at that time. You will be sliding down the yield curve.
Okay.
So theoretically, you could take advantage of that and refinance for debt service savings.
Okay.
So that could help benefit the transaction. Obviously, no one knows what rates are going to be in the future, but most bonds do end up getting refunded for savings. And at that time, if a restructuring is something that the future council might want to consider based on the operations of the parking utility, that's something
Yeah.
that can be done.
and it's only at 10 years?
It's only at 10 years. Right?
Okay.
I mean, we're looking at, it could be a little sooner, maybe 8 or 9 years, but
Okay.
typically 10 is the standard, and because of the change in tax law, we're starting to see shorter call features.
Yeah.
And that's something we'd analyze as we get closer to the bond issue.
Okay, so if, just because of this design with the potential of retail, if, for whatever reason at that point we wanted to flip it around or change, we could do it at 10 years? Okay, all right, good, that's all I had.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm glad you guys have lived up to your expectations. You guys have a good name in the market, so I'm glad we're able to engage you in doing this analysis. I like the fact that you're using a 50 basis point cushion. I think it's very conservative, given that the most that the curve has moved since the end of last year is about 42 basis points on the 30-year end. So I like the fact that we're building in a pretty catastrophic scenario. And I keep going back to the fact, and you mentioned before the tools in the toolbox, that the designation of the redevelopment area for this garage is done, and I want to give kudos to the mayor for bringing that to the forefront. For us, it's been significant cost savings. I mean, we're looking at no design costs. We're looking at being able to negotiate directly with the construction companies. We're looking at lowest cost of issuance. I know we have built in $550,000 potentially, but that will be lower. And also just having more flexibility in financing options, which I like here. I think as a next step, what would be useful for us is, and to your point, Bob, in your explanation before, about the need for the rate increases. In the context, assuming that we go with any option, and then maybe from there we can look at different scenarios of how far we defer the principal. I know we're talking about 2021, but given now that we have potentially this cost of issuance and the option to defer, what would it look like, assuming, I know we already talked about having the first level of the garage being for shops and diners, second, third, and fourth being for monthly parking for commuters and employees, not selling any parking passes to out-of-town commuters. What would it look like then, given this, and talking about a 2 month from now, 2 or 3 month out from issuance, what would it look like in terms of the rate increases? I know we had talked about, based on the Walker study, 75 cents as early as July of this year, going to $1, and then stepping up in 2025 to $1.25. I would imagine that by doing this, we'll be able to smooth out those increases over a longer period of time. So it'll be very helpful for us to see that now in terms of matching up the ongoing operating costs of the utility, right, with the added impact of having this garage now added into it, and then versus the financing timetable and what the cost of debt service would be. So what I think the next step is to go back to Walker, present the numbers to them that we have chosen, and come up with different scenarios, say 3 scenarios, as to the timing of a rate increase, what the impact would have as to the debt service coverage and things of that nature. And that way we could get a better feel for how we want to proceed, if that's agreeable to council, of course. Thank you.
So, thank you, and thank you, as always. Yeah, I would be very concerned with any deferred principal for any extended period of time. I would be very, very concerned. I almost feel it would be the most irresponsible thing that we would be doing. I don't know if you agree with that. I think it's irresponsible. And my take on it is that, and I think back in 2015, when this, the first garage iteration was presented, I felt at the time we should have test marketed the increases at that time, and we would have been banking all of that all this time and had those incremental increases, which would have been significantly less burdensome to visitors and shoppers, diners, and anyone else. So my inclination is to increase the meter rates, I think as quickly as possible. I think that it's going to happen, and it's the inevitable, so we should be looking to accomplish that sooner rather than later, because that's our cushion that we build up, and if we can defer that, then it's to our benefit. I don't know if you agree with that?
Right. Well, looking at it objectively from a financial standpoint, I mean, to me, it's purely mathematical, right? If
Right,
you're willing to do the rate increases now, by all means, pay the debt service off early, because that's going to be the lowest cost.
Right.
But the question is, how much can the system, what's a reasonable level that the council and ratepayers are comfortable with that will work with the system? So that's the balancing act. I mean, I think I would make the statement that I agree, deferring principal for 10 years or something extreme would not be recommended, and I could say that. Is there a balance in the beginning of what can work and use those monies that we defer to effectively create a surplus fund to utilize to maybe lower rates and provide for maintenance and for rate stability in other years?
Right,
So
because you're building up a cushion.
I think that's what Bob is talking about in terms of looking at scenarios that we could present.
Right, I mean, I'd prefer to be building up that cushion for we never know what happens in any given year. We see ups and downs in revenue streams, so we don't know exactly what would take place. So having that cushion, to me, in my mind, and just using that deferred principal just very conservatively, I think is the best approach. That would be my recommendation. Any other questions?
I have one. This is probably for Bob. It's about the kiosks. So I know there was some discussion about implementing kiosks, and we're piloting one now at the Chestnut Street parking lot, and that could potentially increase revenues without increasing rates. And I was just wondering if you put any thought towards that, or if you had any kind of idea. I mean, how's it working, and if you had any idea what the potential revenue increase could be if they were implemented throughout the town.
It's working. We have some blips here and there that I'm trying to resolve before I move forward. We have seen increased revenue because especially the use of cash. It's more convenient to people throw the quarters in actually than the credit card usage. So that's a plus. But with that being said, I have a couple of glitches as to how we're reporting that cash as far as the internal mechanism back and forth. So once I resolve that, which probably should be in the next month, I can then present to council a plan where you want to put the next ones and how you want to move forward with that.
Yeah, I think we had done a very back-of-the-envelope calculation, I think it was about a month ago, where we looked at what was the revenue in that lot prior to the installation of the kiosk, and it was for the previous 12 months, and then we were looking at where we were trending for the next 12 months based on what the collection was so far, and it was almost an increase of 20%.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's about right.
Yep.
Which we had anticipated is what we had from the beginning of that process with the kiosk. We had anticipated, because you're not losing that rollover money.
Right.
It's everybody starts anew, so that's that 20% increase. So, and again, I think that it's important that part of the process of moving forward with the garage was always with the understanding that we would increase the meter rates. So if we're getting that 20% increase by installing kiosks system-wide, and we're increasing the rates, well, then our revenue stream is significantly increased. And to our benefit, I think that is the most important thing we can do in order to provide that cushion in the event of any foreseen issues. And I think it's just the inevitable, and I think most people, when they were understanding the garage process from the outset, we've always stated that the increase to the meters was something that was going to happen.
Correct.
And whether it's the increase in meters, the extended hours, that had to happen in order to support this. So it's not a surprise to anyone. It actually should have happened 2 years ago? 2015? Yeah, 2 years ago.
I think the other element too that we had talked about, just loosely, was the differential in pricing. An on-street spot is worth a lot more money than a lot. So we can look at also if we can make parking in the lots a bit more attractive to get people to go there.
Because right now, if I can park for 50 cents an hour in the street, I got park 50 cents an hour in a lot, Watson moved me out of into the lots. I think that's one of the things that we can look at also with the kiosks. I know the kiosks are not free, so we have to pay for them. So maybe start kind of rolling them out on street with the premium pricing for the on-street spots.
And again, that's something else we could throw out to Walker, because they have all the data for on-street and off-street as to what that impact might be, so we can make a comparison and see where we are.
And the one benefit of that is also the abuses of repeat parking and central, employee issues. So I think that right now there's an attractive number, but I think the kiosk also gives us the opportunity to have a better monitoring system of those abuses. So, it's a problem. Okay, other questions? Mike, another one? No? Okay. All right, so thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for having me again, really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob and Josh. Our next presentation is licensing sellers of e-cigarettes. We have Dawn Citrullo, our Director of Health Department, and our Health Officer, as well as Karen Blumenfeld of New Jersey GASP, who will be giving the presentation. Thank you.
So good evening, and just for the record, just introduce yourself and so our home viewers, everyone knows who you all are. Oh, are you on?
No. Is the light on?
Oh, okay. I was green, but it wasn't on. Thank you for meeting with us tonight. I'm very fortunate to have Karen Blumenfeld here, the Executive Director of New Jersey GASP, which is Global Advisors on Smoke-Free Policy. Had to write it down so I remember, to be presenting with me. Basically, what I want to do, as you know, the smoking world has changed. It's not about smoking cigarettes anymore. It's turned into vaping and juuling and e-cigarettes, which I've learned are called ESDs, which are electronic smoking devices. And technically, they are not regulated, and certain towns are starting to regulate them. And that's what I want to have this presentation to explain to you, what we can do if we regulate them. If we license them, I'm recommending a $1,200 fee per establishment. Currently, we know of 4 establishments in town that do sell them. We know of 9 that are licensed to sell cigarettes. And generally, we would take the funding from licensing and inspecting these establishments to promote non-smoking among youngsters, because as you know, with the juuling and the e-cigarettes, it's very popular with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they're doing it in the bathrooms, and there's no odor with them, so we're trying to have some kind of control over it. And we would also use that funding to do the Tobacco Age of Sale program, and that was a program that used to be funded by the state. I used to actually do it here with the 16, 17-year-olds. We would send them into an establishment that sells cigarettes, and they would try to purchase cigarettes. And if the business owner or the person working there sold the cigarettes, then the child would come out with the cigarettes, and then I'd go in and hand them a violation. And unfortunately, the funding from the state is no longer there, so I'd like to continue to do that. I was able to do it 2 years ago with some funding from the Municipal Alliance, but they're no longer able to fund that for us. So I'd like Karen, she's an expert on this. We've worked with her on several projects. She spoke with our Bergen County health officers on smoking cessation, and she's the person that can really explain everything to you. So, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn, so much. It's a pleasure to collaborate with the Health Department once again. And thank you all for allowing us some time to talk to you today. As Dawn mentioned, electronic smoking devices
is very popular amongst youth and young adults. There's a triple increase in just 1 year, according to the federal government, of youth using electronic smoking devices. And the problem with electronic smoking devices, well, first and foremost, are the chemical components that make up the vapor, which is vaped, and sometimes people call it smoke, but it's vaped. And some of those chemicals are, in fact, carcinogenic. And there have been studies on these chemicals that show like the dangerous components of this. There are even now studies coming out with regards to the dangers of secondhand vapor smoke. And so there are many communities across the state that have banned smoking and vaping in their park and rec areas. Down in Trenton, we're very fortunate. The policymakers there on Monday and the Assembly and Senate committees voted through the bill that would make all the parks, state, county, and local, as well as beaches, 100% smoke-free and vape-free, which is excellent. But, you know, bringing it back here, there's still the issue of how are all these young people getting these products? And it's about the access of these e-cigarette devices to young people. And so it's quite disconcerting because they now come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. They originally came out looking like regular cigarettes, and now the most popular is called a Juul, which looks like a port, you know, that you, a flash drive that you put into your computer. So parents and teachers, educators think that these are, you know, flash drives that are in the laptops, et cetera, or being charged through cell phones at school, when in fact they're Juuls, basically. It's a device, and you put a pod on it, and the pod has the liquid nicotine in it, and then you use it, basically. And you charge the device, it gets a charge, and then when you're done with the pod, you get another one. And they're pretty expensive. Actually, our organization does educational presentations in the school systems too, to educate the youth and the educators, and even we've done it for PTO organizations on the concerns. So what are towns doing in New Jersey? Because basically in our state, what are the laws governing electronic smoking devices? Okay, well, you need to be 21 to be sold these products. So a retailer cannot sell an electronic smoking device, or the vapor, or the liquid, what have you, the wax, you name it, unless the person is age 21. Also, these products cannot be given or furnished. So a 21-year-old cannot give to their 18-year-old friend either, okay? And it's always a civil monetary penalty. That's what the state says. In addition, any of these liquid e-cigarette refills need to be in child-proof containers. Governor Christie signed that law, and that went into effect about a year ago. So that's another thing. So, but how does a town know where to go to see if a store is selling these products to ensure they're complying with the state law? Not selling to people under 21, if they're selling the liquids, making sure they're in the child-proof containers. So there's no way of tracking this, okay? The state does not require stores to get a license from Treasury to sell these products. So unlike cigarettes, if you want to sell cigarettes, you have to get a retail cigarette license from the state, and it's whatever it is, it is. But they do not have this yet. Why do they have it for the state? Probably because they want to collect the cigarette taxes. So they need to be able to have a mechanism on how to do that. But not yet for e-cigarettes. So about 30 towns in our state actually have ordinances, and they're through the health departments, and they're either passed by the Board of Health or the council. And it requires that if you want to sell these products, that you need to get a license from the local health department, apply for that, and then annually you would renew that. And so this way, the local health department knows who's selling the products, can ensure compliance with the state laws. If you have any local ordinances in addition to that, then clearly then the health department can do that. But it's very difficult to do that without some type of a tracking mechanism. And as Dawn mentioned, the licensing fees go back into the health system with regards to ensuring that products aren't sold to young people, like paying for the compliance check program, which used to be funded, I think, right, by your municipal alliance, but that's no longer happening right now. And other types of programming, educating merchants, you know, all these things cost money to create packets or to hold a forum. And merchants change, and so every year you kind of have to do this. And the laws change too, so it's a way to be able to fund that. So about 30 towns have done it in the state of New Jersey. Paramus and Woodridge have done it here. Woodridge charges $1,200 a license. The going rate right now is about $1,200. It ranges lower to $1,200, but like I said, most of the towns are doing the $1,200 because they're factoring in how much does it cost to do a compliance check. And it can get pretty pricey because you have to, pay the young adult or the young person. You have the health inspector. There's reports that have to get generated, so it's not like a very low cost. And then you have these other programs. Sometimes what I suggest to communities is look at what you're charging for a retail liquor license, because that's an age or sale product, right? You have to be 21 to be sold that. And so I think in your town it might be $2,500?
$2,500.
It's $2,500, so $1,200 is even half of what that is. But just like a little bit of background as to that. The other thing I want to suggest to you to think about is that, it's really the entire channel of production through sale that the state regulates when it comes to cigarettes. So if you're a manufacturer of cigarettes, then you have to get a license. If you're a wholesaler, if you're a distributor and a retailer, the entire chain, the entire chain of this product getting to the customer is regulated through a license. So towns are now starting to say, hey, you know what? We're not only interested in licensing retailers of e-cigarettes, but also the manufacturers, the distributors, and the wholesalers, because they may be in our town as well, and we need to ensure that they're making the product in childproof containers. When they resell it, it's not being sold to people who are underage. There are times where a shop may actually be making it in their own store. The EPA doesn't really regulate or OSHA doesn't really regulate other than requiring a mask and gloves. And this nicotine is very highly concentrated. I'm sure all of you have heard about the stories where people, have spilled the nicotine on themselves or a child, and then they have to, they get nicotine poisoning, they have to go to the hospital. Some of these products, with regard to the batteries, are exploding and injuring people. So there does need to be more regulation, but while the feds decide what they're going to do, and hopefully at some point they will, with tobacco, it always comes back first to the grassroots level. And I've been doing this for many decades, and it always starts at home rule. That's what I've seen. So I wanted to share that with you, that some of the communities are doing that to make sure that all channels are regulated. Also, there's one community that decided they did not want to have any vape shops in town, meaning a store that basically that's all they sell exclusively are vape products. And so in their ordinance, they included that kind of language. So it's a menu. You can decide if this is something that you want to do and then pick how you want to do it and what you'd like to include. And just as a side note, to keep your ordinances up to date, so your community was one of the early adopters with regards to smoke-free parks, and then also you made the area around the schools smoke-free. But when I looked at the ordinances, my look at the ordinances, they did not include electronic smoking devices. So school property K through 12, public and private, needs to be smoke-free fence to fence. The vehicles, K through 12, need to be smoke-free and vape-free. Okay, if there's an activity that's sponsored by a school and taking place off of school property, that too needs to be smoke-free and vape-free. And this year, the state legislature passed a law that requires all public schools, not public and private, but all public schools K through 12 to be tobacco-free, so no chew. Okay, but your ordinance is, very helpful because it covers outside of the school property, but it's just doesn't include e-cigarettes yet. So that's something that you might want to think about so you have consistent policies, in your community. But there's a lot of movement on this, and I mean, actually last night in San Francisco, the voters voted to ban all flavored tobacco and e-cigarettes. And so that was pretty big. There was a huge fight that went on for like over a year with this, and the industry poured millions of dollars to defeat this referendum. but the voters, decided what they wanted to do. So that's another area where communities are moving to, because all these flavorings of the e-cigarettes, bubble gum, cotton candy, you name it, and the packaging, to me doesn't, and to the experts that evaluate these packages and flavorants, do not appeal to, adults. They appeal to children and teenagers and young people. So there is that movement to try and pare that back. And even the FDA has, given a word on this as well.
Okay. Questions?
Do you happen to have several ordinances you can send us on this so we can take a look at them?
Sure. We do have a database of the ordinances that get passed. I'd be happy to share that, whichever ones would be helpful for you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Questions?
Okay. Councilman Walsh?
So thank you so much for this. This has actually been a conversation in our household because my children keep saying that their friends are more and more using or vaping, and so it's a topic that I think really we have to discuss, because I honestly didn't, they educated me on what the kids are doing, and they're not just putting in nicotine, and they're putting other drugs in there. So, I mean, that's a huge concern for us as a village, if this is going on, and they need the device to be able to do it. So, I mean, really, it's a grave concern. But I think this is wonderful. I think that you're right. We did do the smoke-free in the parks, and I think that we would have to have some consistency throughout the village with this. So, thank you very much.
Councilman Hushay?
So, yeah, thank you for bringing this. This is very informative. I witnessed a lot of younger, obviously, kids who are under the age of 21. You see them kind of sneaking off around town, and they see an adult, they kind of, run the other way. But it's very concerning because, the effects of nicotine is still there, the addictive qualities of it. The other chemicals that could be in there, we don't know what the effects could be, and as with a lot of the things that the young kids do, it starts with sort of the coolness factor. Back in the day when I was growing up, it was cool to smoke. Thank God that's not cool anymore because of the smell and everything else. But now you're seeing that, kids buy these things almost like, what's a cool gadget to get? And if you can get something that looks like anything but an e-cigarette, it makes it that much more appealing. My question is, do we know of any merchants, because obviously we don't have the licensing today for an ESD retailer. Do we know of any merchants in Ridgewood today that sell e-cigarettes?
We have 4 that we know of.
We have 4.
We have 4 that we know of.
And I'm surprised because the state is always looking for more ways to earn revenue, that they haven't come up with or have an effort on their way to try to get their hands on the licensing, kind of like they do for tobacco. Is there anything now, do you know, on the floor of the assembly kind of making its way through for something like this?
Yeah, last session, there was legislation that was introduced, but it didn't move. It's been introduced again for this legislative session, 2018 through 2019, but it hasn't moved yet.
And then I know you mentioned that you're working with teachers in the schools to help identify how these things work or what they look like. Is there something similar happening with school resource officers, or is that something that the police departments are doing individually as part of the training, or are you also including the SROs in that type of training?
Well, what we've been asked to do is to either present to the PTOs, and that's an evening presentation, and then sometimes they bring their kids with them. During the school hours, it's either in the classroom, it could be the hub classes, or it's in the auditorium. And so recently I just did a school, the entire middle school, it was like 300 plus students. And then whomever was invited, at the school, all the teachers. I don't know if the other adults that were there were those that you're referring to or not. It would make sense. I think that would be really great. I know the student activity coordinators get involved with organizing the event, as does the principal. I know that they do it hand in hand, the school nurse is involved, but that would be really helpful to have that component brought in, for sure.
Sure. And then, how is this tying into the imminent legalization of marijuana in the state of New Jersey? I would imagine, as Councilwoman Walsh pointed out, that kids aren't necessarily using it to smoke, nicotine. They could be putting other stuff in this. I would have hoped that the state would have kind of tied the two and saying, look, because this is coming, that we need to kind of get our hands around what these devices are used for.
Yeah, they're already being used for illicit drugs, including marijuana. And my understanding is that, from police, that you cannot smell it when it's vaped. It doesn't smell like when it's burnt. So someone could be using an e-cigarette or a Juul or what have you, and they're using marijuana, and they could be vaping right by you. And of course, you can't see, you can set some of the devices you can set to have like a large plume or nothing. And with the Juul, I believe it's nothing, because the whole point about it is to do it like, on the lowdown, so you don't know. So if you can't see it and you can't smell it, but then you're breathing it in, as a secondhand vape, that's not good either. And then the question you brought up a really good point too. Okay, what else is in these products? So there's a chemical called diacetyl, which I never knew about until, e-cigarettes came on the market, but it's basically in almost every e-liquid that's used in an electronic smoking device. And it causes this, they call it popcorn lung disease. But it's a disease that the only way you can get cured is through a lung transplant. And they figured this out because the FDA actually allows a small amount of diacetyl to be used in food consumption because it has a buttery flavor and feel on the palate. So if you get buttered popcorn in a bag, okay, for example, or maybe it says butter flavor on your popcorn, okay, it may be diacetyl. It's probably not going to say diacetyl, but, butter flavor, that's kind of like a heads up. So the FDA says it's okay to consume this in quantities that they say you can consume it in. But the people that actually worked in the popcorn factory where they make this product, they were breathing in the airborne diacetyl because it was in the factory, because they're manufacturing it, they're popping it, and they're packing it. And many of the employees came down with this disease, and so they nicknamed it popcorn lung disease. And it was because of the diacetyl. And the scientists figured out that when you eat diacetyl, it gets metabolized differently than when you breathe it in. So when you breathe it in, it creates this problem. Now, these were workers that were exposed over, during the course of the day and over time. But if one is using on a regular basis, electronic smoking devices, it's a big issue. And the UK actually, I believe that they banned diacetyl in the liquids, but in our country that has not happened yet.
But thank you for bringing this up. I think we definitely need to update our smoke-free ordinances to include the e-cigarettes ASAP, because it's, my concern is what happens in the schools, within the building and what goes undetected. But thank you for making this presentation.
Sure thing. And I did read there's, I can look up the name of the company. I'm not affiliated with it at all or anything, but there's a company that's in New York that's making some type of a detector device for vapor from electronic smoking devices. And they're talking to school systems about it because of the issue that we hear about where, the kids are using them in the bathrooms or where have you. And I don't know how they work or the efficacy with regards to these things, but I mean, clearly products like that or other types of, help for schools is definitely needed. But the education is really important because most people think, oh, it's just, I can't tell you how many times I hear this, oh, it's just water, vapor, and flavoring, and that's it. And I'm like, no, it's not just that. It's a host of all these other chemicals, but they want you to believe that. And these products cannot be advertised as smoking cessation devices because they do not have FDA approval. If you want to be getting FDA approval for a smoking cessation product like the Nicorette gum or the lozenges, the pharmaceutical companies, go through massive amounts of testing, clinical trials, et cetera. They spend an inordinate amount of money to get their products through the FDA approval process. And it takes a very lengthy amount of time. So when I was down in Trenton on Monday and I heard a representative from the vape industry, he testified before I did, on the smoke-free parks and beaches ordinance, which includes electronic smoking devices. And he was trying to say that, well, he was saying that, the vaping products should be exempted from smoke-free, this bill, and that basically, I'm summarizing what he said, not verbatim, that, it does help people to quit smoking. And here I am thinking, wait a minute, the FDA has told retailers they cannot put this, cessation language at all when they market these products, and here's the association rep saying this on the record, on tape. So, it's very difficult for the FDA to track every single, representative about this, but it's continuous, that we hear this over and over again, it helps people quit smoking. And the studies just don't prove that out. They really don't. The studies show that people become dual users, so now they're getting twice as much nicotine into their system. And again, the issue with nicotine, right, Dawn, is that for young people, it impedes their brain development. So when I do talk to the kids at schools, I say, look, you know what, it's really competitive now. You've got to be so on top of your game, with regards to everything. If you're doing sports, you want to be on top of your game. If you're doing, for your studies, you want to be on top of your game. And, if you're using nicotine, that's impairing your brain development. So, and you're going to have that for the rest of your life. So, the choices that you make now, even though you may, have, external influences forcing you or wanting you to do something, the choices you make now are really important. And so we talked to the kids about that, their health choices.
Dawn, just for clarification, the e-cigarettes, we have 4 shops. Now, is that vape also, or are those separate? Do we have stores selling vape? Not that we want to advertise anyone here, but I'm just asking, not the names of them, but
I'm not exactly sure what they sell, but they sell something of this form of the electronic smoking devices. But I can look into it. We haven't done an actual survey by going into all the restaurants. It's just, or all the businesses. It's just what we found. So we kind of have been collecting a number, but we don't, that's not the exact number. There might be some more out there that we don't know about.
you just have to, you scratch your head and you wonder, how could something like this become such an issue, and there's no control, there's no oversight, there's no research, so kids are out there, people are out there doing this, and there's no way to know what the long-term impact is to health. So it's fascinating but sad that we fail. It's a failure. It's
Well, the good news is that New Jersey was the first state to ban e-cigarette use inside any public place or workplace. So New Jersey did that in 2009. Can you believe that? And it took effect in 2010. And that was just when e-cigarettes got on the market. And it was the health officer, John Hopper from Paramus, and he contacted our office and he said, Karen, at the mall, they have a kiosk, and they're using these products, and I don't know if that's smoking or not. And, and I didn't even, know what he was talking about, and then researched it. And then, I spoke with him about, well, talk to your Board of Health, see what they want to do. And then the Board of Health said, well, we want to do an ordinance. We want to ban vaping in public places and workplaces in our town. And they did it, and then, it was, I think, a month later, Assemblywoman Huddle, I believe it was, sponsored the bill, along with Senator Cody, and it was done in a couple of months. I mean, it was really fast at that point, but that's when Big Tobacco was not involved, with it. So we should be proud about that, So from the standpoint of denormalizing e-cigarettes inside public places and workplaces, New Jersey gets an A+ for that. But, we're now with everybody else with regards to these other issues. But every town is doing, they're trying to do the best that they possibly can, and we're really proud of that. And we're really proud of the fact that, I've been working on smoke-free parks for a very, very, very long time, and on the state level too. So to see this movement, and I think tomorrow they're voting on it, the Senate and the Assembly are going to vote on smoke-free parks and beaches, is amazing. New Jersey could be the first state. If it does it, will be the first state to ban smoking and vaping in all public, local, county, and state parks and beaches. Will be the first.
place to smoke your pot when it's legalized, but I don't know. Okay. All right, so thank you very much. We appreciate this. You'll send those ordinance samples over, and we could take a look at those. And thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, our next item we're actually going to take from under policy, which is a update report to REACT members Ellie Gruber and Lisa Summers about the policy on banning use of single-use plastic bags. So I'll have them come up now and tell you where they are with that.
Good. Everything is important, everything, and we actually appreciate your patience. So just again, introduce yourself for our home viewers.
Is the light on? Is the light on? Just make
Shut it
sure.
off. Oh, sorry. Ellie Gruber, 229 South Irving.
Okay. And Lisa Summers, 183 Catherine.
Bob Upton, who's the chairman of REACT, could not be here tonight, but he said we should go ahead anyway. Excuse me, and Mike Seaton, deputy mayor, has been our biggest defender in REACT and helped us so much with all this, so you probably know what we're about to say. Anyway, I'm just going to say that we did send, last time we were here, we presented our idea, and you suggested something that was very smart, and that was that we should be surveying the chamber and the guild. So we did that, and now Lisa's going to talk about what our next steps are.
Okay. First of all, we wanted to just thank you for asking for a progress report, and we're really happy that there is openness to considering a bag ban. And as we had mentioned last time, this is really a growing trend in Europe, the United States, and quite a few towns. And in fact, since we last saw you, there's been progress in ordinances in a number of places. And just to set a context, not all bag bans are alike, not all laws are alike, and so there is room for really devising what makes sense for your own community. But what is a typical formula is one in which the supermarkets and some retailers are not allowed to provide single-use plastic bags. They are required to provide, if necessary, biodegradable paper bags, and at a cost to the customer, 5 cents frequently, but it can be 10 cents. There are quite a few places in Massachusetts that do 10 cents, and in some cases they're finding there actually is an economic advantage. But as I said, it can vary from one place to another. So what we've done since we last saw you, we created a survey for the business community and met with the chamber and the guild, and they were very supportive and thought it was a wonderful idea, and were perfectly happy to forward the survey to their members. So far, we've only had one concern that was voiced, and that was from a restaurant, and it was mostly about take-home food and leakage. And so Ellie checked with people in states where there are successful bans and was told that that's a problem that is not insurmountable, that usually a cardboard box is given for food with a paper bag, and the cost is added to the bill, because we don't want to add additional cost to the restaurants for doing the right thing. Also, we looked at other bag ban laws, and TNEC has a law that will go into effect in July. It is not, in our opinion, it's not the strongest law. It does not ban single-use bags. It basically requires that a store may not offer one, but if asked, then there's a charge. In our opinion, that, you know, that's somewhat of a deterrent to people using plastic bans, but frankly, there are a lot of communities out there that I think are doing better with their laws. Ellie also checked with Stop and Shop headquarters in Massachusetts, where there are now 30 towns that have enacted bag bans, and Stop and Shop reports no problem at all with this ban. So anyway, we can let you know about Stop and Shop in Teaneck, for instance, once their law goes in effect, but that will be July. So basically, you know, the upshot is that Ridgewood would not be reinventing the wheel. We have a lot of really good models we could follow. We have states and municipalities in this country that have been doing it long enough that you know, there's a guide for how to do this, and there's also evidence that it's very effective and it has an impact on consumer behavior. Nonetheless, we anticipate that there will be some concerns once there's an effort to create a bag ban. One of the things we anticipate is people who might say, let's just up our pressure on people to recycle and give them better opportunities for recycling bags. Well, here's the thing about that approach. You can increase the opportunity for recycling bags, you can do that. But what you're not addressing by doing that is the extraordinary amount of fossil fuels that are used to produce these bags. You're not addressing the fact that we know that any time you have a recycling program, that the recycling stream is only getting a fairly small percentage of the number of recyclable items that you're really trying to capture. So as it's been said before, recycling should be considered the third R, not the first R. Reduce and reuse come first. So, you know, our feeling is that this is not going to be without some people having concerns, although the business community has not been vocal about objecting to this. Nonetheless, the governing body ultimately is responsible for creating, you know, the laws that will protect the environment. And as you know, and we don't need to repeat in great detail, the statistics around plastic bans are really stark and horrible. I mean, when you think about the fact that there are 1 trillion of these bags produced annually across the globe, and 100 billion of them are in the United States, with 12 billion barrels of oil to produce them, which in itself is an argument for not going down the recycling route as the alternative. And 500 years for one plastic bag to degrade. And for those of you who might be following the news, we had a beached whale in Spain this week with 64 pounds of plastic inside it. So our feeling at REAC is that, you know, it's way past time, and we have great people leading the charge, and it would be a really fantastic and exciting opportunity for Ridgewood to be part of, you know, one of those leaders in doing the right thing. So that's where we're at so far.
She said it much better than I could. So, do you have any questions about, because last time we were here, you asked about the survey, so.
Go ahead. Questions, Jeff?
What are the next steps?
Well, the next steps, if we continue not to hear any objections, is an education program. Just like we're saying to you, we'll put out some information, put it in the social media, however we do it, talk about how other towns are doing it. I mean, today I got 10 cents back because I used my bag at Whole Foods. I mean, that was a good price for me. I didn't mind at all. I get 5 cents at King's if I bring my own bag, you know? So it's a pretty good deal. They're happy to have you bring your own bags. The stores like it. King's likes it. You asked about Stop and Shop, which is why I called the headquarters. Because you said they put in the little turner
Well,
thing.
when they put it's the carousel. So now, because I would bring my bags all the time, they used to give me a nickel and Stop and Shop. They stopped giving a nickel.
I know.
And then they installed the carousel. So by putting that carousel in, now there's no place to put your reusable bag.
That's
It
what I asked the
actually-
girl, that's
it's a
what I asked her
deterrent to
today.
bringing the bags.
Yeah.
It's a pain.
Yeah, she
So-
does, yeah, she didn't know anything about the carousel. She said, what? The woman in Massachusetts.
So they didn't know that they put the carousels in the Ridgewood?
But it doesn't
Because
matter.
there's not a carousel in Paramus, there's only a
Yeah,
carousel
I know.
here.
I think they do it so that you forget some of your groceries. That's my thought, because I'm always leaving a bag behind.
I don't know if that's the
That's how
reason
they
they
make a
do
profit.
it. But, and actually, the carousel is funny, because I think when they use the carousel, they actually put less product in each of those bags. They're very busy filling one, two, and it keeps spinning, so there's actually less product in your bag, so you're using more.
Monmouth County just passed an ordinance, like this past week. They're really going whole hog. So I think we'll start with an education program, talk about it at our meeting, next meeting, and hopefully, in a few months, we could ask for some sort of an ordinance.
Let's just see if anyone else has questions.
So Ellie, you said Monmouth County has,
Just now.
yeah, okay, do you have that copy of that one?
I do not. I
Yeah,
just got the
can you
news.
send that to us, take a look at it?
I just got the news write-up.
Okay, good, thanks.
Let's see, any questions?
I guess we put together, I guess we would put together an outline for an ordinance through what we discovered from various outreach and education. So we put together maybe a couple programs and try and go out there and invite as many people from the community or business community as possible, and then compile all that into a list of sort of what we're looking for, and then take it from there and craft whatever we might want to craft out of that. Okay, that could be an effort that could come to fruition maybe in the fall or winter, perhaps, or...
Be nice.
Okay.
So while we were just sitting here, I had Councilman Hache pull up Suffolk County, New York, as of January 1st, 2018, started this law. We have a summer home in Long Island, and the grocery store in that town, the owners are actually one of my neighbors out there. So I had this conversation, how is it working, what's going on? And it's a 5-cent charge per bag. And she said it's had absolutely no impact.
Right.
People are paying the 5 cents, they don't care. So she said,
Oh,
yeah,
they're paying the 5 cents for the plastic bag?
they don't care.
So
Yeah, it's
the
not
store's
working.
just making more money?
It's not working, yeah.
Yeah, they're
Getting their bags paid.
Yeah,
for.
bad-
She
the
said
bag
that
employees.
You mean if
tell
you
everybody-
don't bring a bag?
You don't bring a bag and you buy the bag, it's 5 cents, and she said, nobody cares. That they're all just paying the 5 cents per bag.
Well, they're paying 5 cents for a plastic bag.
Yep, for a plastic bag.
Yeah, so,
So it's not, so the so-called ban is not really working.
But it's not a ban, it's like Teaneck.
that
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
TNIC model as opposed to a Massachusetts, Seattle,
Yeah.
San Francisco model where you don't get a plastic bag. You
Yeah,
just
so
don't.
they give you the option, you can say, I want the paper bag, which is free, or the plastic, and they charge the 5 cents per bag, and they said that they have seen no change in the usage of the plastic bags.
I just
People
have
are
no
just paying
answer
it,
for
so
that.
she said, I don't know if you'd raise it to 10 cents, if people, she said the 5 cents seems to be, nobody seems to even care, and they're just, charging it, and, but the people that always use a bag, she said, they're consistently still using their bags. Like you have your reusable bags. So she said they're still consistently like the use hasn't changed in their store, and it's not a big store, so it's not like they would be in it, like they have good statistics, I guess is the best
That's
way to say.
interesting. I think the objection from King's was it cost them money for their plastic bags. So this is a way to answer the objection. They don't care about the environment, they just want to make their money back on what it costs them for a bag.
Yeah, but the consumer is not caring. So,
No.
so I guess the challenge is it's the education.
Exactly.
How do you change the behavior and get the education? Like you were saying, it takes 500 years, one bag. That, how many bags do people go through when they do a full, grocery run? It could be up to 20 bags. So, they just used 20 times 500. you know, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a real challenge. I think the more, the easier you make it for people to access plastic bags.
Yeah, I think that's-
If there are no plastic bags to be offered,
right,
then that can change behavior.
Right,
But there
and maybe
has to
that's-
be, the places that have had the most success, it's not just, we're not going to give you a plastic bag, it's, we're going to do a major educational
yeah,
push as well, if for no other reason that, you know, when you violate people's expectations, they get angry. So if you're going to have people come in and not get plastic bags, they really have to understand what that's about.
right. Yeah, so I think that's the biggest, for us, that'll be the biggest,
Right,
you know, hurdle, to figure out how to do the education so that
right,
everybody's happy and we're, the environment's safe,
Right.
so.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So it has no impact, and then the stores don't complain because they're selling
They're making
bags
money
for
on
5
the
cents a
bag.
bag, you know?
They're making money on the
Yeah.
bags.
But
because
their
it probably
bags,
costs them like a
actually,
fraction.
in their defense, so their bag isn't as flimsy,
Oh, it's a reusable plastic
it's a
bag.
reusable plastic
Oh,
bag.
that's a
but
difference.
It's still a plastic
No,
bag.
actually,
yeah.
in Maine, in the vegetable stores, like, you know, the outdoor vegetable markets, you get a reusable plastic bag, which I have been using for almost a year. It is a very sturdy bag. They don't charge you for it.
Yeah, nobody's bringing them back, though. Like, nobody's coming back with those plastic bags to reuse them.
Well, they're very heavy.
I know.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
well,
so-
we'll see. We're going to try and gauge the public
Oh, sure.
sentiment too, and see what they...
And if you need any help, maybe we can team up with the Central Business District Advisory Committee in terms of reaching out to the businesses and getting them together to kind of hold an educational forum. That might make sense as well.
I think you go out onto social media and you start to put
I
that
mean,
out there.
we thought that was the purpose of the survey.
Right, that's what right. Okay,
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving into our discussion items. First one is parking, valet parking on Broad Street. This is, we had discussed this previously. I know the council had some concerns about the proposal. This is on Broad Street for the Steel Wheel Tavern Restaurant. So I'll have Mr. Rudisauser come up. Unfortunately, Sergeant Chuck is detained on duty, so he's not able to be here this evening. If you do have, Mr. Rudisauser was given the questions that you asked. He can address any questions this evening, and then we can decide whether or not we want to move forward with this ordinance.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Again, as Heather said, Sergeant Shuck texted me earlier tonight. He was detained on a police matter, and it did not resolve itself in time for him to be here tonight. So I tender his regrets.
So where are we at with this ordinance? Do we want to?
Chris, why don't you just state what it is that we plan to do, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, the village had been approached by Steel Wheel, a restaurant on North Broad Street, they want to implement a valet service for their patrons, similar to the current operating one at Roots and Park West. We looked at the location. The best spot for them to have patrons drop off cars and valets then park them would be the 3 spaces just south of Franklin Avenue along the northbound direction of North Broad Street. Those are 3 spaces just before the traffic light. Okay, there's the hair salon right at the corner there, and there's also the Boiling Springs Savings Bank just a little further back. They've asked for, I think, 7 days. That's also subject to the council's opinion as to whether you want to accept that. We do know that, like, Roots is very successful with their valet, Park West also. But we've also seen the valet tried in other locations in the village. I think Novo has ceased using it. Leon's Restaurant asked for it and never really implemented it. Fish had it in partnership with Leon's, and I think Greek to Me, that also had a very short-lived event. One comparison with some of those other locations, like Novo, was also just about 4 spaces in from Franklin Avenue on a northbound direction at Chestnut Street. Leon's was on the southbound direction of Chestnut Street, a couple spaces before East Ridgewood Avenue. Fish had spaces on southbound Prospect Street, just a couple spaces in from East Ridgewood Avenue. Roots is in the middle of the Chestnut Street block. Park West is about 4 or 5 spaces south of Franklin Avenue on the southbound direction of Oak Street. We've looked at this and we feel that those are the best spaces for implementation of the valet. You do have a traffic control signal at that intersection. It's one of the few valet locations that would have a traffic signal right there. You also have a pedestrian crosswalk signal for the pedestrians that wish to cross Franklin Avenue. Crosswalks there are also well marked. Again, it's up to you folks to decide if this could be implemented.
Okay, any questions on this?
I mean, I don't have any questions. I have been kind of in that area recently, just kind of observing, you know, the traffic patterns and what's going on there. And, you know, even when this was first presented to us, I couldn't see how this would be a safe process. And the more that I've been over there, I personally really don't think that this would be wise for us to approve. So that's my opinion.
Chris, can we ask them or have them look at spaces that are kind of closer in rather than next to the light? I mean, that seems to me to be kind of an issue.
We looked at that, but the spaces like right in front of the restaurants are angled spaces. The 3 spaces up near the intersection, those are the first ones that become parallel to the curb spaces. And the angle spaces, they would need many more individual spaces to make a successful drop-off and pickup in comparison to the 3 proposed that are just parallel to the curb.
Okay.
The restaurant also initially thought they could possibly use that alleyway, that's the Boiling Springs, but we wouldn't let them do that unless they had absolute permission from the property owner to do that, and they were not able to obtain that. Because we weren't going to sanction anything that didn't have any private property owners' acquiescence.
And would they be amenable to not every day of the week, but, you know, kind of on the busiest times, like Friday, Saturday, Thursday?
I think that it certainly could be discussed with them. The council's feelings in that direction can certainly be made known to them.
I just wanted to point out, all of the valets we have now have it every day of the week.
They
They
do?
just don't use it every day of the week.
Okay.
They just have the ability to use it. And I have to, from what we've seen, it's mostly Thursday, Friday, Saturday when they use it. There are times during the day that they have to pay to bag meters because they have a daytime event. But all of them that we currently have it every day of the week.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just wondering if you can just kind of test it out on a couple days a week and see how it works. I mean, from a safety standpoint and
Well,
from a
I mean-
logistics standpoint, and if it becomes just an absolute mess, then, you know, we just don't do it.
Well, I know from the other valet locations, our police department has kept a very sharp eye on them. When there have been issues with some of the valet attendants, they've been very firm with them. You know, to the police department's credit, they want to make sure the valets are all people who have driver's licenses, excuse me. That's a critical thing, and that they're not on a revoked list or anything. Unfortunately, sometimes things like that do happen, but the police department is very vigilant in that aspect. If a valet attendant commits a motor vehicle violation, they get issued a summons. They're very, I know, talk to Sergeant Shuck, and I can't speak for him, he's not here, but I know they don't tolerate any improprieties.
They would park their cars across the street?
These people, they gave us a sketch. They would go down, I don't remember exactly which private lot they may be going to. They are going to park off-site in a private lot.
But it's not going to be like at the Ken Smith?
No, because most of the Ken Smith now has been shut down.
Okay, got it, all right.
Yeah. So, I guess, does the bank close by 5 o'clock? That's their Boiling Springs?
I believe they generally do. I don't know if they have evening hours, and I also they have an ATM on the outside. I don't know how much ATM use they get, but this should not affect Boiling Springs because they have the parking on the east side of their building, and they have that rights to go down that driveway that was initially thought that could be used for the valet, but Steel Wheel did not get the property owner's permission.
Yeah, that might be better. I was just wondering about conflicts with people coming in and out of the bank or employees or anything like that, but if this is just starting at 5 o'clock and they close at 4 or 5 o'clock, that wouldn't be an issue. But is there any concern with how close the drop-off and pickup would be to the actual traffic light for, you know, cutting into a queue or pulling into traffic? Because on busy nights, there's people driving around looking for parking spaces, and they could really start to stack up at that light there. So I was just wondering if there was, you know, somebody looked at that, or if they thought there might be an issue or no issue or anything going on with, you know, trying to get in that queue.
I think, you know, if there is an issue like too many cars at once, the valet attendants are going to have to be advised that they can't stack. This would be one of the only places that has a traffic signal right by the intersections. All the other valet points, while also close to primary roads, either Franklin Avenue or East Ridgewood Avenue, just have stop signs. And here they have a much more harder and fast traffic control device with the signal. They have to obey that. If there's an issue with them blocking the street, I'm relatively certain the police department would advise them that thou shalt not do that. And they're going to have to adjust their practices accordingly.
Right, well, I guess my concern would be when the light's red and people either want to go underneath the trestle and make that left, then they'd stack up there. But then if someone wants to make a right, they could kind of go on the side and, you know, form another lane and make a right when the light changes. So I was wondering if that, I guess, double stack, that double queuing of cars wanting to turn either left or right would just kind of make it a mess for somebody to also then have to try and cut in to all that traffic that was queuing up right there at the light, if that would be a problem.
I don't think it's going to be that big a problem, and this is why. You have a dedicated left turn lane from northbound Broad to go under the trestle, as you said. Then you have a dedicated lane that's either straight, that could go into the Ken Smith property, or makes a right turn. And then you have the 3 parallel parking spaces that the valet would occupy for pickup and drop off. So the valet coming off those spaces would have to use due caution, merge into that straight or right turn only lane to bring their cars to either storage or for their customers to leave once they picked up their cars.
And then is the private lot to the right, so they wouldn't have to, you know, they wouldn't have to cut over 2 queues, they wouldn't have to make the left? They would
No left.
No, right.
No left is anticipated, or we're not going to permit it because the concern you just expressed, there's too many lanes of traffic they would have to cross.
And everybody feels comfortable that this would be okay?
We feel comfortable with it, that it can work. And again, that's a tempered statement because if the valet has to understand that they have a finite capacity, they have to manage that capacity, and managing that capacity is oftentimes predicated on having enough attendance. We've seen that with other valet locations when they've had too many cars in the street. It's because they don't have enough attendance, and the few they have are running back and forth just to move 1 or 2 cars, and that's when things seem to get a little bit flummoxed.
So would there be a way to, if everybody's comfortable with it, but maybe not quite comfortable with it, pilot this for a certain amount of time instead of issue a permit for a year? Or if we issued a permit for a year, are we able to get out of it if it just becomes obvious that it's really not working after, you know, several weeks or a month or 2 months or something like that?
Subject to Mr. Rogers' opinion, I think that's well within the council's purview.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Want to add something?
Yeah, I'm just going to add, so let me explain what I observed. Maybe I should have done that so I walk across that street, I commute, so sometimes I walk down and I meet my daughter at her job, and sometimes I pick my kids up at the train, so like I said, I've been there a lot recently. So people turn from Franklin onto Broad, and they do the illegal U-turn into the slotted spots on a regular basis, on a regular basis. Every time I'm there, I see 1 or 2 cars do it. Everybody double parks in front of Dunkin' Donuts. Every day, all the time, if those spots are full, you always have double parkers, either letting somebody run in and come out, or picking somebody up and they come out. And, you know, again, these are my observations. I'm sure you guys can all go there and stand there and look as well. There is always a car illegally parked at the corner when there's no spots, so they park illegally at this corner, which impedes the view of anybody walking across the crosswalk there at the beginning of Ridgewood and Broad. So you have a consistent challenge with parking along there. To add the valet now, you're going to have basically 3 lanes of traffic, because they're not going to be parking, they're going to be moving cars. They're going to pull in, get out, and move. You've got pedestrians, the commuters coming across. You've got the people coming in this way. You have the driveway coming out. I mean, to me, I don't think it's worth a pilot. I think it's really a really dangerous situation. And, you know, I personally, because I walk across that street all the time, I'm going to be dodging like 4 lanes of traffic now, because the people come under the trestle, they're turning right, the person coming across, the person going straight, and now the valet. So I can't see how that's going to be a safe situation. And the commuters start coming home, you know, in the evening at 5 o'clock, so they'll be walking across up until, you know, late at night. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you. I think it's a disaster waiting to happen. You have a traffic signal within feet of the location of the unloading and the drop-off of the cars. A turning lane. I mean, I try to avoid that intersection because the bad lighting there is terrible. And you have problems, sight issues with pedestrians who are going to and from the train station. You know, and like Novo, it's directly in front. If you think about, you know, talk about Novo's location was unloading northbound, closer, you know, towards Franklin Avenue from Chestnut. This is northbound Broad into Franklin Avenue, similar location. I know that they have some challenges with their valet parking. This actually came up, not this particular, but it was included in the discussion, but valet parking in general in front of specific stores at the last business forum. And I was amazed at just how, I mean, how all the businesses were there rejected the notion of having valet parking specific to certain businesses. Some of them even cited how much revenue they had lost because of the parking spaces that are immediately bagged while their businesses are still open and the restaurants are starting to open up. So this, I just don't see how it's any better than what we have now at Roots and at Park West. The other concern that they noted was that it creates no foot traffic. So somebody going into a specific location, drop off the car right in front of it, go into the establishment, leave, and hasn't walked past one store in a central business district.
So my take on it is, first, I see the same illegal behavior all the time driving. I see people make U-turns in like the craziest places. It actually is frightening, and that's an enforcement issue. So I don't think double parked cars or illegal U-turns should be the measure of whether or not we contemplate valet for a business, because that illegal behavior happens anyway, and that's an enforcement issue. I think it's almost not related, and I don't think you can penalize a business because of illegal behavior of other people that are just doing crazy. I don't even know why people do U-turns like that. It's insane. I certainly would be concerned that by not permitting one restaurant to have valet service while allowing others to have valet service, in someone's mind might be giving an unfair advantage to some restaurants while saying that the decision about valet is based on now becoming your location and what's in the immediate surrounding area. The other thing is that by virtue of valet, and I disagree with Councilman Voigt that to test it during during the busy times, because, you know, that would be the obvious time that would be a problem. So you either do it or you don't. But in a way, valet actually removes vehicles from the street.
It's a way of making our parking situation a little bit more efficient.
Right, because you're actually stopping people from driving around the block repeatedly, so you actually could have the effect of removing some vehicular traffic. So I would be open to kind of testing it out, but I would just be concerned. I think we have to make a decision whether or not valet is something we want to continue with, or is valet something we want to stop. And I do agree, I think that the valet service, maybe by a special permit. I know there was one instance where somebody they were having a day event and they wanted valet just for that event. Maybe there's something specific, but I think the issue of valet needs to be addressed, because I've heard the similar complaints that it takes, some people can actually measure the drop in their revenue, their sales, based on when the valet actually came in and the loss of those parking spaces to that particular business and the lack of foot traffic. So I think like some of these restaurants, whatever their previous restaurant that was there, people were walking by, people went into different shops, they did go, you know, spend more money. Maybe they walked up and got dessert somewhere, you know, so I think it just, it stops the foot traffic. It's a negative. So I think overall we need to decide if we want to continue with valet, if we don't want to continue with valet, and then if we're going to apply valet, it's just my opinion that it has to be, the opportunity has to be applied fairly to everyone. Just my 2 cents. Okay, so I don't know if we have any.
I guess what I kind of need to get is a sense of the council as to whether or not we have enough votes to be able to adopt this ordinance, because without adopting the ordinance, we can't allow for the valet.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is I would vote for it because we have valet and because it could have the effect of removing vehicles out of that constant rotation around the block, so that one stop. But it would also have to be a commitment to enforcement to stop the crazy driving and illegal behavior, but that I would support this in that to then, but.
Okay, and Councilman Voigt?
Yes, I'd support it.
Okay. And Councilman Seaton?
I'm kind of on the fence with this one because, you know, I've seen how tight that intersection is and how crazy things could get there. But if engineering and the police department are comfortable with it, then, you know, they have more expertise than I do. But still, I mean, it just, I agree with Councilwoman Walsh. It's tough, and I would want to probably just maybe try it for like, you know, if we had to maybe have like a special, you know, some language put into the permit where, because of the signalized intersection, because it's a little bit different than some of the other locations, and there were some questions about safety that, you know, we pilot it for a month or two and then revisit it and get the feedback from, you know, if we could get feedback from business, if we could get feedback from, you know, just observations from police or engineering or something like that, and then make a decision on whether we would want to make it permanent for that location or not, I think would probably, because again, I wouldn't want to say just because you have the unfortunate luck of being located near a traffic light that you could never have valet, even though maybe our professionals say it could work. So it would be something that I really want to make sure was monitored carefully and then definitely revisited.
Okay.
Because, again, I see the behavior and I see how that intersection functions.
Okay, and I agree. I mean, I think that we need, I'm not agreeing with you. What I'm saying is, I agree that there should be enforcement, okay? Because obviously I don't vote, but what Councilwoman Walsh is mentioning, that definitely needs enforcement. And so that's something that I will definitely get done, because it shouldn't continue. So, I'm just trying to get a sense. I think I know.
No.
Okay. So, I mean, it looks right now like we do have enough to adopt this ordinance, so we could push it forward to our July meeting to introduce, and then adoption in August. So I guess that's what we'll plan to do at this time. We'll see what we can do within the ordinance itself to have a trial period as you've recommended, and, you know, have the police observe, which they will anyway, because they do observe all of our valets, and see how it works. Okay, thank you.
Did we have Steel Wheel show up too, just to kind of talk about the situation?
At a council meeting or
Yeah,
before us?
when this gets introduced, so I'd like to hear
Sure.
their perspective on
Sure.
this. Yeah.
Okay, I can have them come to a meeting. Okay.
Right.
Okay, our next one is under budget. This is the appointment of a municipal humane law enforcement officer. This was signed into law in 2017, and it's taking, it took effect on May 1st. It requires an ordinance and a resolution to appoint these officers. Our plan is to name 3 animal control officers of Tyco Animal Control to this position. And full background investigations have to be done for these individuals, and then the police chief would have to approve their appointments. I know that Mr. Rogers has been reviewing the ordinance. We're going to have to discuss it again in July, and I know there are several areas where perhaps the ordinance needs more work. So I don't know if you had any specific comments at this time.
I think the concept in terms of whether or not it's something that the council wants to go ahead with, certainly it's being recommended by the police chief. Certainly it's something that the state legislature has decided to enact and adopt and permit municipalities to participate. So it's just a matter of getting the ordinance straightened out, and that can certainly be done in July if that's the way the council wants to go.
It's not
Yep,
required.
anyone? Opinions? Yes?
It's not required.
I don't believe it's required.
Okay. I think we need to check it, because it may be that it's a required thing. So in any case, Mr. Rogers is going to look, you know, at the ordinance itself and see, you know, how we may adopt it for us, for the village.
Okay.
Okay. So our next item is the contributions as tax payments, the charitable contribution law. I'm going to have Mr. Rooney come up. Basically, as you may know, on May 4th, Governor Murphy signed Senate Bill 1893. It authorizes municipalities, counties, and school districts to establish one or more charitable funds which for specific public purposes, and permits donations to these charitable funds to be credited toward the donor's property tax obligation. We've been talking about this for a while. This law actually takes effect July 3rd. I know when I went to my conference in early May, they indicated that the state divisions of Community Affairs, Treasury, Education, and Banking and Insurance are going through the rulemaking process at this time to, you know, set out the rules to do so. However, we've also gotten some indication from the IRS that they see it as circumventing the property tax deduction from federal taxes, and so it may not be something that we should consider. However, they haven't definitively said that yet, so I don't know, Mr. Rooney, if you had any other comments.
Sure. Let me just give you a brief history as to how we got where we are today. Back in December of 17, the federal government changed the tax law, changed tax brackets, changed the personal exemption being eliminated, standard deductions were increased, and SALT deductions were capped. SALT meaning state and local taxes are capped at $10,000, however, no change to charitable contribution. January 5th, 2018, Congressman Josh Gottheimer proposed individuals donate to a town-run charity, which would allow taxpayers to contribute the amount they pay in annual property taxes to an established charitable trust. This led to Senate Bill 1893, which was passed by both houses on April 12, 2018, which authorized municipal, county, and school districts to establish charitable funds for specific purposes and permits property tax credit for certain donations. May 4th, the governor signs the bill, which takes effect July 3rd, as Heather said, and it delineates the establishment of various trust funds for school, county, and municipalities, allows for property tax credits proposed to be capped at 90% of what they pay. As of right now, there is a 10%, up to a 10% charge that a municipality can charge to administer these funds. It then gives the local unit the ability to establish a charitable fund so that donors can put money into the fund and credit it towards their taxes for state, local, and county. So this would be also require an administration by each entity to establish the funds that could be contributed to, and require the municipalities, since we collect on their behalf, to funnel those monies into these respective areas. An individual that would need to be identified as the custodian of these funds, and a separate bank account would be, excuse me, have to be maintained. The law also said that the regulations will need to be promulgated by the Departments of Community Affairs, Treasury, Education, Banking, and Insurance in order to address issues such as budgeting, tax collection, financial administration, mortgage servicing, and property tax relief programs. So there's a lot of work that the state still has to guidance the state has to come up with before this can be administered. The last thing that's said was the enactment of this law does not guarantee that the IRS will consider contributions to local unit charitable funds to be a permitted deduction from a taxpayer's federal income tax obligation. So with that being said, the IRS issued a notice, 218-54, which informs taxpayers that the Department of Treasury and the IRS intend to propose regulations addressing the federal income tax treatment of certain payments made by taxpayers for which taxpayers receive a credit against their state and local taxes. In response to limitations placed on SALT deductions, some state legislatures are considering or have adopted legislative proposals that would allow taxpayers to make transfers to funds controlled by state or local governments in exchange for credits against the state or local taxes that taxpayer is required to pay. This will allow taxpayers to characterize such transfers as fully deductible charitable contributions for federal tax purposes while using the same transfers to satisfy their state and local tax liabilities. Despite these state efforts to circumvent the newly statutory limitation on state and local tax deductions, taxpayers must be mindful that federal law controls the proper characterization of payments for federal income tax purposes. Bottom line, more to come. There has been no decision on either side as to how this is going to be moving forward.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, so, Bob, I'm a little, sorry, I'm confused on this. So let's say you owe $10,000 in property taxes per year, okay? And you give 1,000 of that to a charitable entity.
That has been established by the municipality, school district, or county.
Understood, okay. So in other words, rather than getting 10,000, I mean, municipality gets 9,000, and 1,000 goes to something else. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So doesn't that reduce our general tax revenues for the year, for at least for us, discretionary funds? I mean, because we got to really, it almost sounds like you got to plan well ahead of time in order to ensure that you're actually meeting your obligations for the village.
There's a lot of planning that's involved, but basically it's just a matter of what bucket you put it into. You're still going to get the same amount of tax revenue, because it's just how you designate it.
Okay, so
if you owe $10,000, you're going to pay $10,000, but you may only get $9,000 credit to this charitable contribution. The other 1,000 goes, I keep the 1,000 for administrative fees, but you can only report 90% of that.
Okay.
Again, that's the way it's talked about now. The local government has not given guidance as to what that percentage would be, or even if they'll allow that 10% to be collected.
All right, thanks.
Well, the local government would be the charity, so you know, if somebody owes $16,000 in property taxes, they could just pay $10,000 of their property taxes to the village the way they always have, and then that would be written off at the federal level. And then the $6,000 would be put into like the Village of Ridgewood Charity Fund or whatever you would call it. And it would still go towards taxes for schools and county and for the village. It would just go into a different bank account, but it would be distributed the same way out of that.
Correct.
So would the IRS allow, when is the IRS going to step in and say yes or no to this? Do you have any kind of indication on what their take's going to be? Because it would be a shame. I mean, I'm all for doing this if it's allowable and, you know, we could help out our residents. But, you know, the IRS might have to step in sooner rather than later to say whether or not they would allow this, because you could go down this road and do whatever work is involved and necessary to set up these funds and these charities and kind of just reconfigure everything, and then halfway through it, the IRS says, no way, this isn't going to fly, and then that's it.
So I've read several articles in the past week. Some say don't do anything till December. Some say, well, the state's going to come out with some guidance, in which case it's going to require the municipality to do something, to establish some procedures, but those procedures may not be effective until next year, because obviously the longer you wait, you can't go retroactive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different theories. I have not read anything as to where the timing the feds are going to come out with.
And you have any idea how much work on your end you would have to put into this to establish the accounts and the charities and the trusts and everything else?
Significant, because there's going to have to be enactment by the council to determine what these are. They're going to have to vote on it. I don't know if it's by ordinance or resolution to establish it. So we're waiting on the state to come out with some guidance as to where to move next.
So another question on the charitable funds. I mean, is it kind of anything goes for a charitable fund definition? Or is it, are we kind of restricted?
That's what
Well, here's the other part of this. A charitable contribution is supposed to be without benefit. So if you write a check to an organization, really you're not supposed to get a benefit out of it. It's charity. In this case, you're going to get a benefit, though. You're going to get some services back. So that's the other part that the IRS is dealing with, as to how you classify this to be able to get around that concept. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this thing.
So you could donate to the fire department charity, but if your house catches on fire that year, then you better not expect anyone to show up, because you don't want to receive that benefit.
That's a good one.
All right, Councilwoman Walsh. So, yeah. So there was a word that you used in your conversation, and it was circumvent. So I don't, you know, again, my opinion that once we try to circumvent things to come to a conclusion, it doesn't usually work out well when you try to circumvent things. You know, in my work, in my daily work, I deal with a lot of people that have tax issues, and I always say to them, I am not a tax expert. You need to consult somebody who's a tax expert. And I think that's the other key thing here, because this is going to be applied to different individuals different ways because of their total income, their type of income, whether they get paid through an LLC, whether they have the ability. So we have no idea the income our taxpayers make and how they make it and how they do their tax returns. So for us to maybe give them false hope that they're going to get this donation or it's going to be deductible for them, let's just say it isn't, they're going to come back to us and say, well, you know what, now I just want, you know, it's going to work better for me if I put it through this way. They're not going to be able to do that. Once they pay it, you know, it's going to be, you can't have it both ways. You're either going to pay your bill or you're going to do it this way. And I've read a couple of the articles, and it doesn't sound to me that the IRS, they're not going to let this money just go, let's say. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that for us, it would be a challenge, and it would be a lot of work on you to go down that road, so.
Councilman Hache.
Yeah, I agree. I think until the IRS finally comes out with a definitive statement of what the position is, you know, the word circumvent That's one thing that these guys don't like. I don't see it happening. In the unlikely event that it does happen, I know we cannot go retroactive to the end of, prior to the end of the year, but if in the event that it does pass somehow, we could look at retroactively to January 1. Can we, let's say if it takes us 3 months to kind of ramp things up, because I would hate to have you do all that work for something that I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're assigning a very high probability to what could be a low probability event, so.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going to.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's perceived as circumventing, I guess there would be interest on, you know, penalties or whatever, and that could be another, you know, nightmare.
What's the risk you run is if a taxpayer relies on it and makes payments, and then when they file their federal tax return, they're disallowed, they would now have penalties and interest.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They'd have penalties and
That
interest, and who
they'd be
would
responsible for it.
Right, and then they would hold us because you're trusting, even though you're saying you know, proceed at your own risk, but,
Right.
you know,
You'd be doing them a disservice, and just, I think Bob's point is to set up administratively what he would have to set up in order to run it without knowing which way the IRS is going, just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
You know, just, I know that there is repeatedly a statement that's made that this is happening in other states already, and it's permissible in other states, and do you know exactly what that is, or are you able to expand on what they're referring to?
So the example they gave in one of the communications was state of California. The state of California may have had 30 or 40 specific charities set up, but they're more or less like scholarship funds. So I want to contribute to a scholarship fund, I can get a tax deduction for that under their state law. It's not going to the governmental entity that is providing the service. It's going to another organization.
Okay, so that's very different than what we're talking about.
Correct, but under California law, they stipulate that that is considered a charitable contribution and it's allowable for whatever, and the IRS has bought that. But in this situation, you're talking about a government entity that you're deriving a benefit from, that there's services related to, so that's sort of adding to the confusion.
Well, it sounds like we have time because the state doesn't even have any guidelines for this yet, so I don't think on our end, we wouldn't have to do anything immediately now because...
No, but I would think July 3rd, by July 3rd, something's going to have to come out because the law goes into place. So the state is going to have to say something,
Okay.
whether it be, you know, going to wait 6 months or we're not, but they're going to have to do something to address it.
Maybe we just wait and see what the
I
state
agree.
says. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob,
Moving
why don't
on.
you just stay there, and we'll go through the next two items, and then
I
we'll
just gotta
finish
get
up
my
yours.
stuff.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the next item is furnishing and delivering of school bus transportation services for the Ridgewood Recreation Department. This is for the day camp and also for the day camp trips. So as you may recall, we are going to reject the former bids because it didn't allow for ADA compliance, and if there were students or people going to the camp or on the trips who had disabilities, it would be difficult for them to get on. So this new proposal did have those provisions in it, and so they went out, they did receive 4 busing firms picked them up, and they received 3 bid packages. There were, the 3 bids varied in price from $31,804 to $37,182. Transed was cheaper for the daily transportation services, and then First Student was the lowest for each of the 2 categories of day camp trips. So therefore, what's being recommended is that the 2 line items for daily transportation services be awarded to Transed, and then also the 2 line items for day camp trip to First Student. Both firms submitted the proper and complete bid package. Once the work is awarded, each company can start to provide the required school bus driver qualifications as called for in the bid documents for review by the Village Police Department. This includes state and national criminal background checks of the drivers and contractor staff with no felony or misdemeanor arrests or charges of moral turpitude or being listed as a sex predator. They must have physical screening, including a hearing and vision test, and also one experienced field supervisor shall oversee the bus operations at all times, as the buses are going to be transporting children. There are several field trips, and all of them can be accessed without traveling on highways if so desired. So that's the good news based on the most recent bus crash on Route 80.
Any questions?
So I have just one question and a comment. I'm just looking through here to see. So apparently, one of our middle schools had a challenge with a class trip because there were no seat belts on the bus in light of what happened to the school and premise. So I'm just curious if we're even looking into that, or what's our obligation to make sure that there's seat belts on the buses. I know this has become a really hot topic lately.
Oh, we'll certainly check it. I thought it was a state law that all school buses in New Jersey needed to have the lap belts. That's what I had heard, but
I don't, you know what, I asked you about this the exact question because of that, and that's what you said.
But I'll check into it further.
Yeah, the lap belts are the requirements. I think Congressman Gottheimer was trying to push for the shoulder belts as well. I think that was sort of the new wrinkle.
Okay.
Right, but that is not required.
Right, currently it's not.
Right, correct.
So if we could just because I don't think it's anywhere in this document, so if we could just clarify that that the buses that they use are compliant with whatever the current state law is, and then maybe have a conversation about going forward, because I know this caused a wrinkle because some parents didn't let their kids go on the trip because it didn't have the proper seatbelts.
Oh, okay.
Because the bus company couldn't provide enough school buses with the seatbelts, I guess.
So I guess the question is whether or not, first, is it state law? And then second, whether or not whether it is.
We as a community, what's going to be our criteria for buses?
Right, what our criteria then should be. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will get that information.
Better, I was going to be a little bit more
Okay.
circuitous to get there. Okay, moving on.
Okay, so we're okay with this? The next one is furnishing, delivering, and maintenance of emergency equipment, radios, vehicle computer systems, and other listed patrol equipment for the Ridgewood Police, Fire, and Emergency Services Departments. So there were two companies that picked up plans, and we received one bid package. The sole bidder is Regional Communications, Inc. The bid was structured so that the prices were obtained for each individual service. Regional submitted a complete bid package with every service with a quote. Therefore, it's recommended that we go with Regional Communications. We have worked with them in the past, and they've actually been the successful supplier for the past 2 years.
Moving on.
Okay, the next item is carpet replacement in the Finance Department and Village Hall elevator. In the Finance Department, the third floor conference room and the elevator, it's still the original floor covering from when we moved in here almost 13 years ago. The carpets have become threadbare, torn, buckled, some tripping hazards. Therefore, we're proposing to go under state contract to Brothers Carpet and Flooring in Hackensack in the amount of $14,068, and it's in a current capital account for this removal and installation of new carpet.
Any questions other than what color?
Maroon.
The next item is the quarterly financial report, which Mr. Rooney gives to us, so I'll have him take it from here.
So as keeping with tradition in providing you with quarterly financial information on the revenue and expenses of the various funds of the village, only in this situation I'm giving you 4 months worth of activity since our budget wasn't adopted until May 4th. So any deviation that is significant from 33% of the budget, I've provided with some explanation along the right side of the columns. In the revenue stream, most of it is the timing of billings. A lot of our revenues are generated through mid-year billings. So, for example, ABC licenses, the renewal may not take place till June, so therefore we won't be realizing anything until, the 6-month end. On the second page, you'll see a significant amount of items there that are fully realized. Those are grant programs. That money is in the house already, so it's just a matter of taking that in and classifying as 100%. On page 3, the general fund revenues, probably the biggest fluctuation there is under administrative charges and vehicle fees for police and outside services. That's seasonal. The bad weather, we don't have as much road work that's being done, so we don't have the opportunity to bill third parties for the services that the police report on. So I did talk to Chief Lutke, and we went through the timing compared to last year and things of that nature, and we're on track with that. So we're where we need to be. And lastly, on that page, we've had the ability to realize about 50% of our tax liabilities and revenue stream because of the prepaid taxes that we had at the end of the year. So we're able to take all that in. On the next page where we talk about appropriations, again, most, if not all, of the other expenses are about encumbrances. The department directors have not had the opportunity to encumber funds because the budget wasn't adopted yet. So you'll see, less than 33% on those items, but it's clearly similar to what we had last year. So I won't go through every line item here, but if you had any questions on specific items in the appropriations, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Again, some of these are seasonal, where you might have higher salaries due to snow removal and the timing of when the needs are. That sort of flattens out as we get through the year, so that'll compensate for those high percentages.
Does anyone have any questions on any of this? It's pretty straightforward. Any questions?
Bob, could you just go over again, you said the administrative charges, we're supposed to have, we're at 14,000, and it's, obviously the budget's 350,000, we're a little bit low there. And you said, the chief said we're on track. I don't, help me understand what that means.
When we looked at it, we compared it to last year, same scenario. You have the, the winter months that you don't have as much road work being done. And so when we do start the road work, again, remember these are on a cash basis.
Yep.
We have to bill them, and then by the time we collect it, we're probably into June. So we have a significant jump in the next couple of months to catch up on
Okay, thank you.
Bob, just one question. On the first page, there's a cable franchise tax, Cablevision, 363,000.
Yes.
Versus 368. What is that?
That's a franchise fee that Cablevision pays to us in accordance with franchise agreements. It's a one-shot payment, and so we pretty much know what it is when we go into the year. So,
thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Nothing? All right.
All right, so water. So I believe it's page 12. That's the water utility fund. Revenue being down because of weather. A lot of rain, people don't use water as much, and so that's dropping the revenue stream down up through April. Expenses, again, the appropriation side, encumbrances could not have been made until the budget was adopted, so that's at 13%, and that'll grow. It's grown already because Rich and his department people are cranking out the encumbrances as we speak. Let me catch up here. And then parking. Parking revenues are pretty much on track. Again, a little bit of seasonal activity there. You may not have as many people out using the parking facilities as we would in the nicer weather. So we're at 30% on the parking meters. So I'm comfortable that we're okay with that side. And on the appropriations side, again, we have encumbrances that have not been put into place for other expenses. I have a full-time PEO that hasn't come on board yet, so that's the reason for the salary and wage being lower than 33% of the budget. Any other questions?
On the parking meters, can you break out what is Park Mobile versus Coin?
I don't have that with me, but I certainly can get it for you.
Yeah, just want to find out how that's doing.
Yeah,
thanks.
I'll send you a summary that'll tell you
Thank you.
the breakdown.
So, anyone else, any questions? No. So the weather impacts water and parking.
Yes.
That's kind of like a...
And police.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right, no other questions? Okay, moving on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awarding a contract under state contract for a 2018 Chevrolet Tahoe to replace a 2006 Ford Expedition. It's in this year's capital account. It's $34,695.68. The contractor is Hertrich Fleet Services, Inc. of Milford, Delaware. It will be used by the Fire Inspection Bureau to transport personnel and equipment to emergency scenes and to transport personnel to firefighting classes. The older vehicle will be sold on line on Gov Deals.
Any questions?
Okay, the next one is 2-in-1, the proposed ordinance for the Hillcrest Road Streetscape Project and also the proposed ordinance for North Pleasant Avenue Streetscape Project. So these are two capital ordinances. These are 100% funded through NJDOT grants, which were received for each of these projects. The plan is to introduce these ordinances at the July 1st reorganization meeting and adopt them at the July 18th public meeting. This will get the funding in place so that the village is able to move forward with these streetscape projects.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, what are we doing with the streetscapes? I mean, specifically, is it new trees? Is it?
Well, it includes curbs and sidewalks, but I'll have Chris speak about it.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening again. The streetscape project includes resurfacing the road, usually mill and pave, minor drainage work when necessary, replacement of curbs that are past their useful lifespan and driveway aprons, and also the planting of street trees where applicable.
Okay, good, thanks.
Oh, and marking crosswalks accordingly.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Yep, moving on.
Okay, the next is policy, Public Health Nuisance Code. According to Chapter 52, the Public Health Practice Standards of Performance, local boards of health shall conduct a public health nuisance program to include the investigation of public health nuisances. In 2005, the village adopted certain sections of the Public Health Nuisance Code. However, we did not adopt the section regarding the depositing of matter which serves as food to insects or rodents or which constitutes a breeding place or harborage for any insects or rodents. That was a summarization. Dawn Citrullo, our Director of Health, is suggesting that we do so now. We did have some issues with some rodents that were being fed. This was, I know at one point we had looked at bird feeders. This would not include bird feeders. It would only include bird feeders if the ground or the area beneath the bird feeder were not cleaned up, or if they didn't have some kind of tray or pan under it. So it would not include them unless they were, having the seeds everywhere, which would then attract these rodents. So, but it's a good idea probably to do this so that we don't have an instance where people are, maintaining matter. And matter could also be other than food. It could be, dead wood, things like that, so that would harbor insects or rodents.
Okay. Any questions on this?
I had one question. Would this impact anyone who might want to do like backyard composting or any, but it would be, I guess maybe it would be under the same guidelines as the bird feeders, so if you cleaned up after it and you took care of it, you'd be okay. So if you turned your compost and you took care of your
Right.
stuff, you'd be all right.
It
But
would
if you
be
just
all
had a
right.
pile of
Correct,
junk sitting there and it was attracting,
correct.
okay, that's it then, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, the next one is under operations, authorizing the age-friendly application for the AARP Community Grant. Age-friendly Ridgewood has proposed to apply for a grant to purchase 2 solar-powered pedestrian crosswalk warning signs for the village. This is similar to the walk warning signs over by Graden Pool. And so the place where they'd like to place it, one is at the mid-block crosswalk on North Maple Avenue from the library to the shopping center, the King Shopping Center, and another one possibly on Franklin Avenue at one of the intersections there. Again, this is to endorse the grant application by Age Friendly.
Okay, any questions? We're good?
All right, the next one is amending designated individuals to issue notices on dead trees. As we all know, we've had a lot of storms this past winter and spring, and a lot of limbs and branches have come down. And looking at the current language in the code, it doesn't permit the code enforcement officer to send letters to residents on tree hazards. And so this would add to the ordinance those who can enforce these, sending these notices. It would include the village's code enforcement officer, Parks and Recreation Department, and/or the engineering division, in addition to the current ones, which include police and/or fire, I believe. And then it also adds the village's code enforcement officer, Parks and Recreation Department, and the engineering division to those who can enforce this chapter. And again, that's also the police and fire departments who can do that, as well as, I believe, the construction official, and also the village sanitarian.
Questions? Okay, moving on.
The next one is authorization to join U.S. Communities Grant Government Purchasing Alliance. This is cooperative purchasing and pricing. Actually, one of the village's principal suppliers of electrical supplies is on this cooperative, and it will save the village from having to bid out these items. So we recommend joining this purchasing cooperative.
Any questions? All right, do you have a question?
No.
So
Okay.
moving on.
Somehow the review of the agenda got down lower. I'll do that now. So the review of the agenda for next week, we have one proclamation, which is recognizing the 60th anniversary of the Cashwell Memorial Shell. We have a resolution for Ridgewood Water to award professional services contract for water rate study. We have public hearings on ordinances, amending Chapter 212-31 for the skate park rules and regulations. We won't be doing, we do have establishing the valet parking area on North Broad Street. We have the amending Chapter 190 land use and development, establishing regulations for the blade signs in the Central Business District, amending Chapter 172-6 nuisances enumerated, bands and music, and then the redevelopment plan for Block 3809, lots 12 and 13, the Hudson Street parking lot. In addition, we have resolutions waiving 4th of July vendor fees, granting permission to the fireworks company for the fireworks display, rejecting bids for the school bus transportation for the camp, Title 59 approval and award of contract for the school bus transportation for the camp, Title 59 approval and award of contract for vehicle emergency equipment for police, fire, and emergency services, awarding contract under state contract for carpet replacement for both the police department and the finance department, awarding contract under state contract for the 2018 Chevrolet Tahoe SUV for the fire department, award professional services contract for Phase 1 archaeological study for the Shedler property. We've discussed this previously, and this is something that Margaret Hickey, who is our current architect who's working with us on the Shedler property, is able to do. And so this can be an addition to her contract in order to be able to provide this service. The next one is extending the suspension of the ordinance for certain illuminated signs in the central business district. We're going to extend it to December 31st. Hopefully by that time we'll have the planning board's report on that and be able to move forward. Authorizing an encroachment agreement for Olive Arch West for the gooseneck lighting. Authorizing mailing of estimated 2018 third quarter tax bills. Authorizing joining U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance. Authorized joining Somerset County Cooperative Pricing. Authorized Director of Parks and Recreation to sign certain seasonal contracts. Authorizing application to AARP Community Grant for age-friendly Ridgewood for pedestrian safety improvements. Endorsing application for Bergen County Historic Preservation Grant for the James Rose Center. Authorizing a settlement of claim for Fasiglia, and then approving the 2018 to 2019 renewals of liquor licenses. I'm hoping that we can get all of them. I'm waiting for tax clearance certificates for 2 of them. And so if we do have those, we have one that needs a special ruling because it's been inactive for 2 years, so we can't act on that right now anyway. So if we can get those other 2, all of the active licenses will be renewed. Did you want any of those off of the consent agenda?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Oh, you know what, can you take off the valet?
Oh, that's an ordinance.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay, okay. The next one is manager's report. So I want to remind everyone that Monday, June 11th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m., we will hold an open house in this courtroom to view the plans for the Hudson Street parking garage. We'll have representatives from Epic Management, who's a developer, Tim Haas, who are the architects for the design and structural elements, and Bowler Engineering, who are the civil engineers. Mr. Rooney will be here to answer questions about financing. It's not an official council meeting. It's basically an open house. Residents, those business owners or people who work in the Central Business District or anyone who's interested in the project, we invite you to come. And you can come and go as you please. You can ask your questions. You can look at the plans up close and personal. And so we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. Sunday, July 1st at noon is the Village Council's reorganization meeting. I just want to remind everyone it'll take place here in the courtroom. And I do want to remind everyone also that the Village Council work session for June 20th has been canceled. Grading Pool opened last Saturday, as mentioned by Ms. Loving, and they're open 7 days a week from now to Labor Day. Pool memberships and daily passes can be purchased by residents at the pool office. Pool hours are during the weekdays 12 noon to 7:30 and weekends 10 to 7:30. The Ridgewood Guild's Music in the Night, showcasing a wide variety of musical performance, began June 1st and will continue in front of several participating restaurants every Friday night to the end of August. The Cash Hall Shell opens its season tomorrow night with tunes in June by the various groups from Ridgewood High School. Next week on June 14th, there will be a special anniversary concert by the Ridgewood Chorale celebrating 60 years of the Cash Hall Shell and 90 years of the Ridgewood Chorale. And again, as I mentioned previously, this is very special because they were the ones who opened the Cash Hall Memorial Shell 60 years ago. Movies in the Park, sponsored by the Ridgewood Guild, will start next Wednesday, June 13th. Come to Memorial Park at Van Ness Square to see your favorite movie outdoors in the park. The June 13th movie is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. The movie starts at sundown or approximately 9 p.m. Bring a chair or blanket and enjoy free movies in the park. Movies are shown every other Wednesday, and the movies that will be shown during the summer will be Big, La La Land, Toy Story, Mrs. Doubtfire, Planet of the Apes. So I encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities.
So I just had one quick question. I think that Ann may have raised it earlier, and there was a thread on Facebook, social media, about the closing of Graydon on Monday, and folks, I guess it was inclement weather early, and then the sun came out and was shining bright, and people showed up. They thought they were going to spend the afternoon in the sun, but there was no posted notification. There was nothing anywhere. So I mean, I think for me, I'd like to better understand how that works exactly, and, you know.
But what I'll do is I'll get that information and report on it next week.
Okay,
and
yeah, that would be helpful.
Then everyone will be aware how it works.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving on, Councilman Voigt.
Planning Board met last night. There was a courtesy review of the Hudson Street Garage, along with a presentation by Epic. Epic's seems to have done a really nice job in thinking through the issues so far. We had a review of the installation of a granular activated carbon system to treat perfluorooctanoic acid and perfluorooctanoic sulfonate. In order to meet EPA health advisory standards, the mayor and I were asked to recuse ourselves. I'm assuming that went okay. Matt, it did? Okay, good. We memorialized a resolution for a minor subdivision at 401 Mountain to split the property into 3 separate lots. There was an approval of the developers' agreements for the Dayton, which is the Brogan site, and the Chestnut Village, which is the DMV site behind the YMCA, YWCA. The mayor and I attended the Gay Pride flag raising ceremony yesterday at Ridgewood High School. Very nice ceremony put on by the students of the Gay Straight Alliance. Charlotte Simpson and Sarah Vaccaro did a very nice job, students at Ridgewood High School. Tom Gordon, who's the principal at the high school, provided some words of wisdom on acceptance of everybody, and it was just a nice event. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, the mayor and I attended on Saturday the gun violence awareness program at Van Ness Square Memorial Park. It was put together by Mothers Demand Action, and after that we went down the avenue to all of our twists to celebrate the official opening, the grand opening of that business. And then after that, we went over to Graydon for the meet and greet on the Graydon patio. It was a senior event, and it was well attended, and everybody had a good time and got to enjoy Graydon on opening day as we did. So that's basically all I had to report.
Councilwoman.
I've got nothing to report.
Councilman.
Nothing to report.
So I only have 2 things. The first one is that the RBSA had their last special All-Stars program this past Sunday, and all of our special needs children who participated in the special All-Stars had a little baseball game, T-ball game, and when all was said and done, they all received trophies, and it was a really fabulous event. So we have to thank Brendan Buckley, Karen Whalen, Jim Albano, and unfortunately I don't recall the name of the other lady who was very much involved. All of the parents and the kids who came out from RBSA to assist the special needs children, to run the bases, to hit the T-ball. It was really exciting. It was lots of fun, and the kids really enjoyed receiving their trophies, and the parents are really excited and proud. So it's a great opportunity to allow special needs community to participate in sporting events, and kudos to RBSA. They put that together 11 years ago, and to this day I remember for myself, one of my friends had she has an autistic son, and up until that day he had not had any opportunity to participate in organized sports in the village of Ridgewood, and so we remember how excited he was at his first opportunity to play a game of t-ball. So 11 years going strong, and many more years to come. The other thing that came up, a resident had suggested an ad hoc committee be organized to review any potential conflicts of interest for individuals appointed to boards and committees. And I thought it was an interesting opportunity to better understand what boards and committees, the members, appointed members, if they do have any specific conflicts. And one came to mind that occurred a couple of years ago, and it was a significant issue. I don't want to get into that right now, but it's probably something we should consider, and we could just have some paperwork or something. We haven't vetted this with council, but some kind of form that identifies that individuals who may have a conflict of interest would step away from either the entire board or any specific discussions. So, and that's it for now. So with that, we will go back to Public comments.
Good evening, Boyd Loving, 342 South Irving Street. Just following up on the subject of Graydon and closing Graydon, it would be nice if there were a phone number that we could call, or that it could be posted someplace when, so if it looks like it could be iffy, you could call someplace or check someplace online to determine whether the pool is in fact open or closed.
Right.
So when the manager gives her report next week, perhaps we could hear something as to whether that sort of a plan could be implemented or not. There was a discussion, I believe Councilman Walsh discussed the bus situation. I believe the situation that affected the middle school was that they had requested charter buses because they wanted air conditioning, comfortable seats, and restrooms. So that's what the issue was, that the charter buses don't have seat belts, but it's mandatory in the state of New Jersey that all school buses have seat belts. That being said, though, you have contracted with a company, you should make sure that they are providing school buses because they may also own some other sort of bus. So if you want the children transported in school buses, which have more of the safety features, the seat belts, the yellow color, and the escape hatches and things, the contract should specifically state that they must provide school buses, not just a bus, because I believe that's what happened to the middle school. They ask for something different than school buses, trying to make the kids more comfortable, and then realize that the things that are more comfortable don't have seat belts.
Got it.
I must say that I'm very upset about what I heard about the garage tonight. There were a number of things that were said about the garage that just absolutely floored me. One of the things was that the life expectancy of the garage was said to be 30 years. I believe that that number is very high. It's a prefab construction. There's caulking going between the seams, and I thought that the builder said that the caulking has a life expectancy of between 15 and 20 years, and that is if you take care of it properly. So I believe 30 years is very high, and I would be concerned about entering into any sort of financial arrangement that requires 25 to 30 years to pay it off, because the garage may not last that long. So be thinking about 25 to 30 years, because your garage may not be up in 25 to 30 years, based upon what I know about prefab construction. These people who are building the multi-million-dollar houses now with prefab foundations, they are told that the caulking on the slab, between the slabs lasts 15 years, and then it has to be redone. And that's the same type of construction you're getting, prefab, concrete cast construction, and the caulk has a limited life expectancy, particularly when you use salt, as what we're probably going to be doing in the garage. Deferred payments. Deferred payments. You pay more if you pay later. Why would we want to spend any more? Forget about the deferred payments. I don't know why you would want to defer the payments. You wind up paying much more the longer you wait to pay. Why should taxpayers why should we pay more? If we don't have to pay more, let's not pay more. Then I heard the gentleman say something about we would borrow more to pay off interest. So we're going to have bonds, and then we're going to borrow more money via another process to pay off some interest. So we're going to have two loans to pay off the garage? That doesn't make any sense to me at all either. This really confused me what we're getting into in terms of trying to pay this thing off. And then it seemed to me like this rate increase is a done deal. I thought we said that a rate increase is tantamount to nothing more than a tax increase or another tax, and we were going to try to avoid that. Now I hear talk about rate increase, rate increase, rate increase. Maybe we should have done the rate increase already. I don't know where that came from. We said it is basically another tax, and why are we going to add another tax? So again, I'm confused. It seems as though we still haven't figured out how to pay for this. The train is way out of the station now, and we still don't know how we're going to pay for this. The last time we had a rate increase, people went nuts. We had to stop the rate increase. We rolled it back. Now we're talking about doing it again. So please, let's slow down on this thing and talk about how we're going to pay for it before we get ourselves in a big financial mess here. And there was a comment made about well, we're getting low, we had no design costs, we have lower construction costs. Just because it cost you less to build the multi-million-dollar house doesn't mean you should buy it. Thank you.
Ann Loving, 342 South Irving Street. I just wanted, on a totally other subject, tell you something that my husband and I learned today, that you can call the Bergen County Mosquito Control, and they will come to your house at no charge. Obviously, this is paid for by our taxes. And they will check out your property for mosquito areas, and they'll spray BT spores, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a non-pathogenic spore, not pathogenic to us, but pathogenic to mosquito larvae as well as various other. It's been used for years for caterpillar control with crops and stuff, and it really is non-toxic to humans. It's in the same genus as Bacillus anthracis, which is anthrax, but so we called and they're going to come to our house. I mean, why not? The mosquitoes are going wild. So you only have to call the Bergen County Mosquito Control for that. And I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And no more public comment, so we will take a resolution to go into closed session.
Be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on June 6, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter on the agenda can be reached, and that said closed session be held in the caucus room of the Ridgewood Village Hall, 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey. Be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to personnel matters to include appointments to boards and committees, and legal matters to include potential litigation, health barn. These matters are allowable under NJSA 4:12 et sec. And be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public when such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.
And make it fit in.